We got at least Amy's remote.
Can anybody hear us?
Sheila.
Yeah, Amy and Sheila.
We have room for them in here if they want to come in.
All right. Now can anyone hear us? Amy, Sheila?
I can hear
I
you.
can hear you.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. The time is now 7:02 p.m. and I will call this meeting to order. May we have roll call, please?
Mayor Reichel,
Here?
Pro Tem Knott,
Here.
Trustee Britnall,
Here.
Trustee Klassen,
Here.
Trustee Flores,
Here.
Trustee Hammerhand,
Here.
Trustee Seifert,
Here.
Did you get Trustee Britnell? Yeah. Okay. I must have missed that one. So, all right. May we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Be seated. The first item on tonight's agenda is public comments. We got someone's speakers turned on.
Good now?
We're good? Okay.
Woo.
Now we're good. Okay. Persons desiring to make public comment on items not on the agenda, please activate the raised hand function in the meeting program. Or Sheila, did we have any phone calls or emails in regards to non-agenda items?
No, we did not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I do not show any raised hands.
All right. Do we have anybody signed in?
No, sir.
All right, and nobody is signed in here in the chamber, so. We'll move on to the next item, which is the consent agenda, which contains the minutes of the June 13th, 2022 Board of Trustees meeting. Anyone like to discuss that or make a motion?
No discussion here.
Nope. Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve the minutes of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right. We have a motion by Trustee Seifert to approve the consent agenda as presented, seconded by Trustee Clausen. All is in favor?
Aye.
All is opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Do any board members have any conflicts of interest with any agenda items tonight?
Not
No,
here.
sir.
We've got none either. Do we have any agenda changes by the board or by staff?
Nothing from the staff.
Nothing here.
Board? All right. Moving right along. Next item on the agenda is the Silt Water Wastewater Treatment Facilities Master Plan Project, the Dewberry Report. And I will turn this over to Administrator Lehman.
I told you that might be quick. Let you guys all pull up a chair here to this table. And I'll let Patrick Radabaugh with Dewberry introduce his cohorts there. Probably recognize one of them.
So I'm sure you recognize Tony.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Patrick Braddock with Dewberry, kind of a principal technologist with the firm, and I have Kyria Bosma, a wastewater engineer. So I'm going to start this. It's my understanding they're to put the presentation up on the Zoom.
It'll come up like right now.
Awesome. So we're going to review the entire presentation we've given to town staff, talking a little bit about this whole process, basically to prepare a project needs assessment for the state to proceed with funding applications and moving the project forward with design and construction. Next slide, please. So here's kind of the agenda we're going to run through real quick, some some of the projections for the planning and the design criteria, the regulatory review. I'm gonna talk about the water plan evaluation and identify the shortcomings. And then we're talking about the alternatives and a discussion of those alternatives centered around addressing all the shortcomings we identified in the water plant. Then I'll turn it over to Kyria, and she'll do the same for the wastewater plant, and then we'll conclude with some conclusions and recommendations. At any time, if you have any questions, we like feedback, so stop us anytime with questions, and we'll address them at that time if that works for you all.
That's great.
Awesome.
You know, it just occurred to me, I really didn't maybe fully introduce the topic. Does anyone have any questions or as to why we're here? I mean, we've talked about this a few times, and of course, you all know that we've engaged Dewberry, but I felt like I kind of didn't maybe set the groundwork very well when we got started. Everybody's good?
I think we're all good.
Yep, I think
Okay,
we
you
got
guys-
it.
So up on the slide, these are the demand projections on the water side. You can see now the town is at a population of about 3,600 people. Looking for development to end up to just short of 8,000 people in 2042. With that, we're anticipating the average annual day production at the treatment plant to increase to just short of 700,000 gallons and a peak day production of about 1.2. Now, all this assumes that the town continues to use raw water for irrigation at the current rate they do now and expand that system. So looking at these projections, we're basically recommending that we put in a 2 MGD plant now so that you have a little bit of redundancy involved. That's expandable to 3 should the raw water system go away or should growth proceed to occur faster than expected. That ratio of average day to peak day is low compared to other communities, but we would contribute that to the fact that you have a very expansive raw water irrigation system. In terms of the water use per day at about 85 gallons per capita, that's very similar to what we've seen at many other communities. So, any questions on that one? Okay. There's one thing I want to point out there real quick before we go to the next slide. Notice that the peak day right now is just short of 500,000 gallons per day, and just remember that when we're talking about the water plant evaluation in a few slides.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So here's the equivalent on the wastewater side of things. You can see that we're looking at increasing or having a future plant capacity of about 0.5 MGD and about 2,300 pounds of BOD. Your per capita production and flow rate production are very similar to other communities of this size, with about 0.2 pounds of BOD per capita and about 67 gallons of wastewater per capita.
What's BOD?
It is a surrogate measure of organic compounds in wastewater.
Okay.
So we use that. It's basically how much oxygen does it take to make the waste clean.
What's MGD?
Million gallons per day.
Oh, got it, okay. And then what's, oh, okay.
So
PPD?
AA is annual average, MM is max month, peak hours is peak hour flow. So in a wastewater facility, we're looking at some of the unit processes have to accommodate the max amount of flow that the system will take in a given hour. That is mostly impacts disinfection and the headworks equipment.
Okay. Okay. Just trying to understand it.
This is very, there's nothing out of the ordinary here compared to other communities. Like, it is very, nothing caught our eye.
One of the things to pay attention on that part of it, though, is the total capacity of the plant, the flow rates. They'll go into detail over that versus the BOD capacity versus the flow rate capacity.
Yeah, Kyria will talk about that. There are 2 different capacities we have at wastewater plants. There's the hydraulic capacity and the organic capacity.
Got it.
2 separate things.
Okay.
All right, next slide, please. So just looking at the regulatory side of things on the water, what's actually affects the treatment plant currently and what's actually coming down the pipe per se. LT2, so right now the system has a membrane treatment system, and membranes are not required to sample for total organic carbon. Total organic carbon impacts such things as disinfection byproducts. The way the regulation is written is it says that conventional filtration plants are required to sample for TOC. It is something that was probably miswritten in the legislation, and they meant to encompass all the treatment facilities. It will likely get corrected in the late 2020s when they upgrade and improve LT2 with new regulation requirements, and therefore all filtration systems will likely have to sample for TOC removal. So although you don't right now, you will likely have to in a few years.
I think I didn't hear you, maybe on these acronyms, you could
Okay.
just say what they are. What's LT2?
LT2 is the long-term to surface water treatment rule. One of the various parts of the Safe Drinking Water Act that came out from the federal government, published and enforced by the EPA.
Got it.
Sorry, the water side of things, they are very keen on acronyms, and there are plenty. I'm sure we'll throw out 50 or 60 here in a few slides. DBP is disinfection byproducts, such things that you've heard as maybe trihalomethanes or HAA5s for anybody who has dealt with water treatment. PFAS, PFAS or PFOA, it's been the new boogeyman on the water side of things in the news. I'm sure you've heard about it, the forever chemicals. Silt is small enough that they are not required by the EPA to sample for them. Only 300 municipalities of this size and across the country sample for them. But they are pretty prevalent everywhere. They have been picked up in several Colorado communities. I think Erie just picked it up, which is kind of random because I'm not sure where they picked it up from. It is present in firefighting foam, is a big part of it, and Teflon. The other thing that has not been impacted for the town of Silt yet, we were just talking with Trey earlier, is that the residuals pond have not been cleaned out in 15 years.
At least.
And T-norm, so technologically enhanced, normally occurring radioactive material can be present in there, is, to the best of our knowledge, has never been sampled for in the residuals. So when that pond is cleaned out, that'll have to be sampled for, and if it is found to be present, it'll have to go to a special landfill.
And that pond is like a polishing pond?
It's not a polishing pond, it's where all the drains go from all the filtration.
Oh, it's your
and
backwash
back-
pond?
yes.
Okay,
Yep, so all those residuals will eventually be
right.
tested, and then when we get into the alternatives, that pond is going to stay, and we'll continue to use it, but it'll have to be cleaned more frequently than once every 15 years.
And is it lined right now currently?
No, it's not.
It's not.
I want to say the drawings have a clay liner in it.
I don't believe so. I'd have to check.
I thought that's what I saw in there. And then there's secondary standards for iron and manganese, and potentially some toxicity issues associated with manganese coming up in the future. And those are associated with taste and odor. If people have reported mineral tasting or off-colored water, maybe they've had purple underwear coming out of the wash.
That's enough from that.
Yeah,
Got it.
What's the T and O? Is that?
taste and odor.
Got it. And that's something that's coming from, in
I-
development from the state.
Those are secondary standards for iron and
They are
manganese.
secondary now.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they're not enforceable, but most people will complain if you exceed them.
Right.
Or your underwear comes out, or t-shirts come out
Are
colored.
they likely to be a primary standard at some point? Is that? No, okay.
Next slide, please. So scroll up just a smidge, or some numbers that are in the bottom of this table. There we go. On the wastewater side of things, there are two major regulations that impact things. The town of Silt is below the regulatory requirement to have Reg 85 impacted. In some respects, that is unfortunate because Reg 85 was a stepping stone to nutrient removal at wastewater treatment facilities. Reg 31 passed. Reg 31 is being pushed by the Water Quality Control Commission. Or excuse me, let me rephrase this. The Water Quality Control Commission is pushing the Water Quality Control Division, the people who actually enforce all the rules and regulations, to implement and write Reg 31 limits in a discharge permit starting in 2027 with a 5-year schedule to get it implemented. So the earliest it would be required for the town of Silt is in 2032. The Reg 31 limits, they're on the screen, are for total nitrogen and total phosphorus. They're water quality standards. So even if we get some dilution in the river, they're still very tough to meet. That phosphorus limit is pretty easy. We can do it with chemicals, but that total nitrogen limit is very scary and will be incredibly difficult to achieve. That is the costly one.
Do you have your current, what you're putting out right now? Phosphorus and nitrogen?
I want to say the phosphorus is on the order of between 2 and 3, and the nitrate is somewhere in the 8 to 15 range, depending upon the time of year. The TIN, sorry, total inorganic nitrogen. Total inorganic nitrogen is short the organic fraction of nitrogen for this TN limit.
Right.
So TN is composed of the TIN plus organic fraction. Most treatment facilities that I've seen have a unbiodegradable nitrogen fraction of between 1 and 2 milligrams per liter. That when you run that through your plant, it doesn't remove it. We're working with the operators to collect some of that data now, so we have a better understanding of how it's going to impact the facility going forward in the future, but we don't have to have it right now.
Alright.
There's a lot of research looking at that number, trying to find ways to remove it.
So those numbers that are listed right there, those are not current regulatory numbers. Those would be the numbers if they write Regulation 31 as they're pushing. Correct?
Regulation 31 it is written, it is published,
Okay,
and the commission is pushing the division to write it in a discharge permit starting in 2027.
okay.
So you'll get a 5-year compliance schedule. So the earliest that it would impact the town of Silt is having new facilities online in 2032.
Right, so that's already done. and
That's
happening.
already done.
Yep, got it, okay.
That the limits will be published in your first discharge permit after 2027. And Tony, when did the last discharge permit get published? I forgot the year.
I forgot the year. I can look it up.
Do you know, Trey?
20. Sorry.
But regardless, it will be sometime in the early 2030s.
Got it.
It could be, I want to be careful with that deadline because as soon as they implement it, it could be as soon as they rewrite the permit, depending upon whether it's a 2027 or whether they administratively extend the permits. Because a lot of times they get backlogged on permits, and so they will administratively extend them out a period of time. And so it's all just kind of dependent upon who's working at the division at the time.
Agreed. That's why I was asking about the discharge permit. They have said they will give 5-year compliance schedules from the time they impose it.
Correct. I agree 100% with that.
So, next slide, please. So hopping into the evaluation of the water plan, if we have no questions on the regulatory side of things, I mean, they're really fun to read. I can send the regulations. On the water plant side of things, so the real fun part. The water plant is in the 100-year floodplain. So all that means is we just have to have all the tanks and all of the process equipment, all of the process floors 1 foot above the flood elevation. We're going to do some improvements to the raw water flow measurement control so that we can tie the raw water. We've done some work on that with Tony and the operators, but we want to improve it so that there is minimal wasting and that the what we're drawing out of the river actually matches what the process needs and can be satisfied with. On the pretreatment side, yes, the town currently uses ACH for pretreatment, and that's a great thing because it minimizes chemical addition through pH control. But there is insufficient flocculation time, so even though you're adding a coagulant, you're not actually accomplishing anything. So to give a quick review, in coagulant addition, we basically add aluminum, and when we add aluminum, it will partially precipitate and create these particles. We need to mix it ever so gently so that these small particles become larger particles, and the larger particles are easier to settle out. Therefore, it's easier work for the filtration system downstream. We try to collect these big particles in big tanks. Right now, they're trying to collect those particles in the plate settler. And unfortunately, there's just not enough time for that reaction to occur, or the mixing is incorrect. So we're not actually doing much work in that plate settler as much as we could.
Don't you have 2 plate settlers?
No,
Oh, just
we
one.
only have one.
Right now, additionally, there is no real true coagulant dosing system. It's kind of what the operators want to do, or if they see more turbidity, they turn it up. If there's less turbidity, they turn it down. There's no TOC removal monitoring currently at the facility, so talking about that regulatory issue we talked about earlier, where it's a remnant of the legislation where it was written potentially incorrectly, that is likely going to change coming up in the future when they rewrite LT2 in the late 2020s, and all filtration, all water plants are going to be required essentially to have TOC monitoring. And right now, there is no true treatment system for iron and manganese treatment, and we need to, right now, they are adding a sequestering agent, and that sequestering agent doesn't actually remove it, it just kind of blinds it for a while until the sequestering agent wears off. Any questions so far?
So on the iron and manganese.
Yeah.
We already have a lot of that has gone through the treatment plant that is in our city water lines. So is there a process to clean the lines, or is there a replacement to clean the lines?
You want to start?
There-
Aaron? This
There
price
is a
of
new
both.
technology out there that you can scour a line. It's called ice pigging. And basically, they mix up ice and send it down the line to try to scour the lines.
Yep.
To clean that out of it. And that, there's one company out of Georgia that does it that I've found so far. But that would probably be a cheaper option than replacing all the lines, even though some of them do need to be replaced because of age. And also some of them we might not be able to get to because you go from fire hydrant to fire hydrant. And we have some runs that we might not be able to do that with the valving and stuff in the system.
Okay.
So it'll be a glorified flushing and scouring process to get that out of the system.
Which probably is not something you want to do until we have a new water plant, so we're taking care of it before it gets
Yes,
Okay.
you're not adding more into
Exactly.
it.
Yeah,
into it. Okay.
but a question for Trey is, you guys flush hydrants periodically. I mean,
We try to
have you
flush
seen
twice a year.
decrease in all the manganese in doing it, or is it still kind of the same?
In places, we have seen a decrease in the discolored water and stuff. And in some places, we've seen the manganese go down, but we still have some spots in town that even after we flush, it seems like it just churned it up more than before we flush, so
Okay.
we need to extend the flush time or something to try to figure that one out.
So that manganese, is that what, like my house, I gotta change filter about once every 3 weeks and it gets dirty. Is that what that is then, this manganese? Is what
Is
is
it-
making that
Is it black or purple, or is it red?
dark brown?
I would venture to guess it's a combination of iron and manganese then. So
Yeah.
iron tends to be orangish red. I'm a little bit colorblind, and manganese tends to be
Okay,
purplish.
cause about every 3 weeks,
Yeah,
I
it's,
gotta dump it out.
it's the iron and manganese in the
Is that what it is?
system that's, yeah.
So is that because of the lines in that street or is that because of the treatment plant? I mean, is that something?
All the above?
Probably
Okay, no,
both.
I'm just curious. I mean, I didn't know if that's,
Yeah. Yeah, most of our lines, when we go to fix them, you can see the inside is coated with that
Slime.
rust-looking color and slime.
okay.
So next slide, please. So diving into the membranes. The plant, it is stated as having a capacity of 1 MGD, but the true capacity is actually only 0.6 MGD and not the 1 MGD. This is based on information from the manufacturer. The average skid capacity is 0.38 MGD, as you can see on the screen, and the peak capacity per skid is 0.5. Apparently, when somebody rated this, they gave it the peak capacity and timesed it by 2, and I would relate that correlation to your car. Your car may say it can go 120, and you can maybe get it to do 120 for a little bit, but if you had to run your car to 120 all the time, it wouldn't last very long. Same with the membranes. They will work very well at 0.5, but if you push them past that, they don't last very long. If you take the 0.38, yes, and times it by 2, yes, you get 0.72, but then you have to account for backwashing and cleaning those membranes, and you get down to about 0.6. That assumes they're operating for 24 hours a day. If you're operating for 18 hours a day, which we're doing, you get down to about 0.52 MGD or so. And you'll notice earlier that we showed a slide where the peak day is about 0.5 MGD. So you're operating very much at capacity on a peak summer day with really no room to spare unless you operate 24 hours a day.
And then the downside of operating 24 hours a day is what?
Staffing.
Okay.
Staffing, and then if we have to operate 24 hours a day, the clean in place process, that takes a couple hours. So you got to allow for the skid to be completely offline while you clean the membranes and
Okay.
then bring it back up online. So if we're operating where we have to operate 24 hours,
Yep.
we're going to lose 4 hours as we take each skid down,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
and the other skid's not going to keep up.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, even if you did that under best conditions, the most you're going to get out of those membranes day in, day out is 0.6 MGD.
Okay.
No more.
For both of them together.
Both of them
That's
together.
not one being broke down or.
Right. That is everything operating optimally. No pinnings going on. Both of them are in service.
Right.
If one is down for pinning, half that.
And then have you guys counted for loss, for water loss, and what's that number?
So we looked at some of the data, and I would say that the meter data is very inconclusive in regards to that number. I will gladly walk through it. I did not include that in that presentation, but there are some numbers showing a massive water gain, and then the next year will show a massive water loss, which tells me that there's something wrong somewhere in the meters. What we can track is that the water plant production and the wastewater influent numbers are very close to about 80. The wastewater influent is about 80% of the water influent, which is a very true number across the board. So those two numbers we believe.
100,000 less.
Yeah.
And then how about for, compared to billing, how much is being billed and how much is,
That's
the
exactly,
same? Okay.
that's where there's something that we can't rectify in that
Oh, okay.
data. The water plant production data and the wastewater influent data do seem to correlate.
Right.
But the other meter data,
Doesn't line up.
does not line up.
Okay.
Okay.
Great question. We tried to look into it, and
Yeah. Just figured fixing a pipe would give you, 0.25 MGD or something, so.
100%, 100%. But the
Yeah.
water and wastewater data lined up, so we tend to believe those numbers.
For sure.
So the plant staff is performing maintenance to the best ability that they can. They're doing the backwashing. They're doing maintenance cleans daily. They are unable to perform CIPs, for one, for a time constraint, and two, they don't have the heaters necessarily to do it, and they don't have, the biggest thing is the time. It takes about 6 hours, and they're generally worried about just trying to get water out the door.
What was CIP?
Clean in place.
In place.
And so essentially, they're running these membranes very hard and then don't have sufficient time to maintain them. This membrane technology is also rather old. There are no membrane systems put in that use this technology. Most of them now are pressure membranes. This is more of a gravity membrane. When pinning is required or one of the membrane little strands has been broken, a whole system has to be taken out of service, and it takes a lot of staff, and it takes it almost out of service for about a day. So it can be a big problem if that were to happen on a hot summer day. Any questions?
I've had to pin them before, and I'm not a big fan of that membrane system that we have at all. Yeah.
No, I think you hear no arguments on this side of the table.
How old is that treatment plant again?
It was built in 2005, and the story I heard, the deal we got on the membranes that went in, they were out of date when they got put in. It was old technology.
Yeah.
Because when we call to find parts for it, they're like, oh yeah, you're the plant with the dinosaurs. Let us see what we got.
We were looking, when, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but when we were trying to investigate alternatives, the manufacturers were very, in fact, I couldn't get them to give me a number to replace the current system. They all switched it to the new technology, which is a pressure-driven system, which has higher flux rates and better cleaning, smaller footprint. Next slide, please.
You guys, sorry,
No, go ahead.
you guys can still get the filters for them.
Yeah, we can still get the filters.
So we looked, just finalizing the water plant evaluation, we looked at the disinfection system. The tablet system works, seems to produce some inconsistent dosage, so there's no really consistent dose control. Where that really could impact things is improving or maintaining a very steady disinfection byproduct. The higher the chlorine concentration, the more likelihood to form disinfection byproducts. So if we have insufficient dose control and we dose too high one time, we could have higher disinfection byproduct or formation potential, which then causes a bunch of regulatory requirements that we would rather avoid. It's a big issue. We looked at the contact basin to make sure it was sufficiently sized for anything going forward in the future. Yes, if there is one basin, but that can be handled. We can clean that. We can use divers. It'd be nice to have two, but one will be sufficient. It's sufficient to accomplish 4-log virus inactivation going forward, but insufficient if we have to modify that in trying to look at Giardia. When you look at disinfection, there are 3 main criteria trying to evaluate a disinfection system. They are viruses, Giardia, and Cryptosporidium. Your filtration process, if you're looking at membranes, you get credit for all the log removal you need for Giardia and Crypto. If you go to a mixed media filter, you need to provide a little more disinfection credit for Giardia. When we're looking at the alternatives, a lot of the alternatives we looked at had mixed media filtration. It's also followed by UV to accomplish that requirement. You have questions, Sam?
No.
Okay. Does that make sense? And then the last thing at the water plant is the finished water pipe pumping. We just have to add a few more capacity as the plant grows in size. Not a big deal. Next slide, please. So we looked at trying to develop some short-term alternatives, and these are some of the big ones we accomplished that are really easy to take care of. Upgrading the controls, yes, that's really going to be pretty easy, but a lot of that's going to come down to whatever coagulation, flocculation, filtration process we put in. We need to replace the strainer, yes. Put in a good pre-treatment system, so that'll likely increase membrane life, but it will not increase capacity. Yes, we need to improve coagulation, flocculation with a flock tank, or we could utilize the pond across the river, but I want to stress utilizing the pond across the river. Even if we do that in the short term, yes, that will lower the turbidity to the plant, which could increase the membrane life, but will give you no increase in membrane capacity. No matter what you do there, you are not getting anything more out of those membranes. We could also expand the well field on existing town property. Disinfection, switching to liquid hypochlorite, or potentially changing over to chloramines. Both of those will help with improved or lowering the disinfection byproduct formation potential. Next slide, please.
Is there a cost estimate on using that pond across the river, or?
We didn't develop one specifically, but we're estimating it somewhere in the ballpark of probably $2.5 to $3 million. Knowing we'd have to put in a pump station, we'd have to get the pipe somehow either under or over the river and into the site.
Okay.
Long-term, which essentially will become the short-term, so we looked at some pre-treatment alternatives, process to handle. The biggest thing was developing a pre-treatment process that could handle the wide range and raw water turbidities that we see coming in off the Colorado River. We looked at a DAF. Unfortunately, DAFs will not work when the turbidity gets high. We looked at conventional flock sed, a flocculation sedimentation system with plate settlers. We looked at basically flock sed and coagulation with upflow solids clarifiers. We looked at active or ballasted flocculation, and then we looked at green sand, chlorine dioxide, or ozone to remove taste and odor and iron and manganese. On the filtration side, we looked at pressure membranes with a firm capacity of 1.2. Actually, we sized it for 2 mgd. And we also did the same for conventional mixed media filtration. Mixed media filtration is basically gravel, some sand, and then anthracite. Denver Water uses them. City of Louisville uses them. Town of Superior uses them.
Snowmass.
Snowmass, yeah. They can be very nice and forgiving.
Yeah.
City of Glenwood.
Glenwood, I was like, that was, thank you. Any questions on some of those alternatives? What they are, what they do? We'll talk a little bit more about them.
What
here
does
in a minute.
ozone do?
Ozone is an oxidant, and we can use it to oxidize iron and manganese. So when you oxidize iron and manganese, it forms a particulate, a solid matter that then we can then filter out. So the iron and manganese that causes the problem in the raw water side of things, they are very reduced, and then they're very soluble. And then when we oxidize them, they become insoluble. That's when you see the red or purple stains.
Patrick, could you, leading into this slide, you made the comment that this essentially long-term alternatives would become our short-term.
Yes.
Could you explain your
Yes.
thinking on that a little bit?
So we need these short-term alternatives to actually basically improve the water plan and get us the capacity that we're going to need now. It would be nice to have some short-term alternatives that would get us some increase in capacity, but unfortunately, because we're maxing out the capacity of the membranes already, we need to, for lack of better words, scrape it and start over with a good pre-treatment system in front of it and then a good filtration system.
So there is no
So there is no,
there is
short or
no
long term.
intermediate,
It's all,
Head around it.
it's all
Fire,
one.
fire.
there's no intermediate,
There's no intermediate.
which is kind of what we had been
Right.
talking about.
Unfortunately, then the long term then becomes, if we put in a 2 mgd plant now, the long term would become, maybe we increase and go to 3 if we need to. Plan for a 2 now, you'll operate, we put in 2 trains, you operate 1 train most of the year and have the other one as redundancy. On the peak days, you run both. Therefore, you can maintain things.
Is there a plan for worst-case scenario before this is done to supply water to the citizens?
Great question. We're gonna talk about schedule here in a little bit, but a lot of it is gonna focus on, can I skip that until the
Yeah,
very
sure.
conclusion and come back to that?
Yeah.
That's a great question, and it leads to a longer discussion. Okay. Next slide, please. So basically, here's the short-term alternatives bundled up. It's everything. This is alluding to Jeff's question right here. Improved pretreatment, improved filtration, and additional, put in some sort of iron and manganese treatment system. We need to do another water tank. And if we go with mixed media filtration, we'll also have to include UV. Next slide, please.
I guess I got a quick
Yep.
question.
Yep.
Between the long-term and short-term, maybe I could ask it later, but I guess while we're here, maybe it's for Trey or them. When we started this, we had X amount of growth. Last meeting, Planner Cheney brought a lot of growth coming. That's coming. Is the short-term even, are we even gonna be able to keep up with, with what he had? There's a lot of homes coming in. Is the short-term even feasible? I'm just asking while we're here. Is it gonna outgrow faster than?
With what we've got coming in and everything else, it would be better to skip the short term and get more capacity.
That's what I was asking.
Short term's dealing more with cleaning up the water to make the membranes last longer. And the capacity is gonna be the bigger issue.
Cause I know when we started this year, whatever ago, we had X amount, but like I said, last meeting, I don't know how many hundreds of homes we had, we had a lot of homes coming in where I'm just thinking out loud here, is short-term even feasible?
So we're gonna talk a little bit about schedules, some ways to expedite
Okay.
it, because I 100%, I think we would agree that needs to be expedited. And
Okay.
I wanna talk about that at the conclusions, recommendations, because there's some
Okay.
things that
I
can be
just- I
done.
maybe-
No, that's a great question, and it is,
If at all.
it opens a can of worms to a discussion that is going to be, I think, better suited if we can get to the end.
Okay.
Okay. Next slide, please. So, next slide, please. So those are the two things we just talked about, doing everything up front now to get you capacity. And then the long-term one basically is an expansion of the capacity from 2 to 3 MGD. So here's kind of some alternatives we looked at. We looked at a solids contact clarifier with mixed media filtration, coagulation flocculation in plate settlers with filtration, both mixed media and membranes. We looked at a conventional package water treatment plant, coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, filtration. Then we looked at ballasted flocculation with mixed media filtration. Alternatives 1 and 4 do not play well with membrane systems because they use polymer. Polymer and polymeric membranes, they don't go well together. We could have looked at ceramic membranes, but the ceramic membrane cost is about 3 times that of polymeric membranes, but their life is 20 plus years. Next slide, please. So here's a site plan showing the solid contact clarifier with mixed media filtration. You can see there's a larger building kind of to the northeast of the current building. Excuse me. In this plan, basically we'd put all the new equipment into that new building. There you go, thank you. While we're constructing that building, we would continue to operate the old building. Once the new building is online, we'd bring in temporary chemical systems to help run the facility. And then we would retrofit the old building and put all the chemical systems and upgrade it to meet the code to put all the chemical storage systems in that building. Because right now it will not meet the code for the chemical systems, and some of the chemicals do not play well together. We need to have the oxidants away from everything else, or they will ruin each other. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. So here's the site plan, just looking at if we did plate settlers infiltration, you can see it's a little bit smaller building. The smaller square to the right is the membrane system. The slightly larger square around that is the mixed media system. The mixed media takes up a little bit more space than the membrane system. The other new square is just primarily the pretreatment, the system with the coagulation, flocculation, plate settlers. Same scenario, we put all the new equipment in the new stuff, get it started up, go back and retrofit to the old building, put the chemical systems in. Next slide, please. Conventional packaged water treatment plant. You can see the same thing, it's just a longer, skinnier building, same kind of concept with using all the chemical systems in the old building. And then next slide, please. And here's the one with the ballasted flocculation with the mixed media filtration. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of comparing all the different technologies. So with a solids contact clarifier, what that is, it's basically this large basin. It keeps a layer of residuals at the bottom of the tank. We do all the coagulation, flocculation in the bottom of that. Then water flows up and passes through that layer of residuals. Doing so, it removes them and allows them to settle to the bottom. Clarified water flows out over the top. We send that to the mixed media filters. It's very effective, can handle a wide range in turbidities because it carries that level of residuals within it as kind of a quasi, almost like a filter. The downside of that, we are going to have to add UV, not a big deal. We run it at the wastewater plant, really simple. In the mixed media system, we can put in this stuff called green sand, which is an oxidant. It serves as a catalyst to oxidize iron and manganese, and we can do it right in the filtration process. Alternative 2, we looked at basically using coagulation, flocculation, and plate settlers with either membranes or mixed media filtration. Same kind of concept. It will work great. It will accomplish all the goals. It might not be as good handling the wide range in turbidities without a lot of operational input because the operators are going to have to change the coagulant dose and optimize the pretreatment system every time the turbidity changes. Same with alternative 3, the conventional water plant. And alternative 4, which is a ballasted flocculation process. Eagle has one of these. Montezuma Water Company has one of these. It essentially uses sand as a ballast to help do the sedimentation part of the process. And that works very effectively. They produce a really high quality effluent so that your downstream filters have minimal turbidity and work better. With any of the mixed media systems, we can put in the green sand, as I said, so we can accomplish iron and manganese removal. Just kind of a quick comparison between the technologies and trying to give you the Reader's Digest version of them. Does anybody?
Is there, what are the TSS limits on those?
Um,
Similar?
They all reduce effluent of about 1 NTU.
How about the?
Coming out of the pretreatment. On the raw water, alternatives 1 and 4 are the best at handling the wide range and influent turbidity up to 1,500 NTU.
And what are we getting on the storm events?
1,300.
We're getting 1,300 right now.
Great question.
So what do the two middle ones do? What does 2 and 3 do?
They work more like a conventional process, probably what you have at Snowmass, and you can do it, but whenever their turbidity goes up, you're going to have to change your coagulant and or your polymer dose to modify your settling.
Okay.
Can it be done? Yes.
Oh,
You could do it. The other two are just more forgiving from an operational perspective. That is the primary difference. They'll all accomplish it. Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, that makes sense.
And Patrick, the pond you're talking about there is the pond,
Yes.
the current pond.
Yep.
Yeah, the backwash pond.
Not the new.
Not the new one. So that pond on the bottom, all of these systems are going to produce more residuals than we have currently, and it's going to require that pond to be more frequently dredged and cleaned.
Now, is that water in the pond reusable?
10% is reusable by the filter backwash rule, so we can put in a small pump station to collect that water and pump it back to the plant, and that would probably be a wise maneuver. We did include that. Good catch. Just keep me on my toes tonight.
Oh,
Like, that was a
sorry.
great question. Great question. Jerry, you look like you had some questions.
No, I'm just taking it
Yeah,
all in.
it's a lot. I realize that. We're trying to give you the,
Yeah, it's, like I say, I can do a lot of stuff. I have a hard time keeping the bromine clean in my hot tub, so it's just a lot of figures and chemical I just gotta take in, so.
all right, next slide, please. So here's kind of just a quick review of the costs, looking at alternatives 1 through 4. You can see the cost is somewhere between, on the construction side, we estimate somewhere between like 23 and 25-ish million, or excuse me, 19 and 25 million, depending upon which one we pick. In speaking with conversations with staff, we're thinking alternative 4 is probably the best because it provides a pretty good operational flexibility in terms of managing the influent turbidity, Sam, that we just talked about. And then the opinion of probable total project cost, we added in an additional 20% just to account for any engineering, administrative fees, and construction oversight. Then we also have to put in the town is a little bit short on water storage, so incorporating another 500,000 gallon tank out in the distribution system.
Patrick, would this be a good time to talk about sort of downstream costs? And not necessarily,
I think we have the next
we have
slide.
another one, okay.
Next slide, please.
And then personnel too. would be-
So yes,
Oh, there you go.
scared me there for a second,
I
Jeff.
knew that was coming,
Yeah.
sorry.
So we're looking at the annual costs here, just kind of a quick estimate. They're generally going to cost the same. They're all going to take about 3 staff to operate. They're all going to require about the same amount of coagulant, same amount of power, residuals, equipment O&M. The 2 that I didn't include here are going to be the filtration media system costs. Mixed media, we don't have to replace as often. It's a little bit cheaper than membranes, probably on the order of an annual cost of 5 to 10 grand. You'll do it every 5 to 10 years. On the membranes, it's more on the order of 30 to 50 grand, where you're going to do it every 5 to 7 years.
But if we go option 4, we can't use membranes, correct?
I'm sorry?
If we do option 4, isn't there a note that says you can't
cannot
use,
do membranes.
Can't do a membrane, yeah.
If you do membranes, they will allow ceramic membranes downstream of that process, but not polymer. And that has to do with the fact that they use polymer. And polymer and membranes, they tend to foul.
And how does this compare to the current yearly costs? Is it about the same, or
I think
it
this-
doesn't have to be actual number, but just more of the same, less?
this is going to be higher because it's more chemical cost and more people.
There's more people, yeah.
So
And
what
there's going to be more
population is this
equipment.
based on? The population we have now, or what, these costs roughly?
Future, so we looked at the 20-year cost and then scaled it out.
Okay,
We just used the
just so
20-year
I know I'm
number.
clear, so.
So right now, you're right, it's probably gonna be, the coagulant disinfection power cost can be slightly less, so maybe it's 600
Okay.
now and goes up to 820. Fair point, we're just using the worst case for a budgeting perspective.
So I just kinda know what we're
That was the
talking.
8,000 population,
Yes,
right? Okay. Or 7,400.
7902,
Yeah, something like that.
okay,
Okay.
yeah. So it'll be
Also-
more staff. Now Carrie's gonna present on the wastewater side of things in a little bit, and that'll talk about a staff, also another staff of 3. So, and you have 4 right now.
Yes. And also, did you talk about a couple of these options? Granted, we're looking at building a 2 MGD plant, but in the future, if we need to add on to that plant, a couple of these options in that scenario is cheaper because you don't have to buy
More building.
more building, more land. It, which ones was that?
Go to the next slide, please.
Oh, okay.
So here's just kind of a quick comparison between the two. So this goes back to your Sam, one of your questions, Sam, on the managing the variations in influent turbidity. And this is just trying to compare the two systems. You can see we can meet all the 20-year growth. Now, alternative one, to Trey's point, those systems are all 35 foot in diameter, and the building that houses them is only, I think it's 100 foot wide at the moment. So if we want to put in a third one, you can see that that building size is going to be significant. Whereas if we go with active flow, all the infrastructure is already going to be present. Those tanks are actually relatively small. If we design the building correctly, we might be able to get them all in the same building and just leave space for it in the future. Tough to leave space for a system that is 35 foot diameter. You can see all these systems, when we looked at from a planning level, you'll be operating one system on the average day, both systems on the peak day. So you'll have some redundancy. So say they had to do something where something happened, they would still be able to produce water. I think it was you, Kyle, that asked something about resiliency going forward and
No,
improving.
wasn't me.
Okay.
Somebody else. I don't think, that wasn't me. It had to have been Sam.
He knows more of that technical.
He's the water guy. Yeah, yeah.
But we tried to improve it, set it aside or plan for it so that the operators would have some resiliency and redundancy. So in the event one train was out, they could still actually produce water with the other. And there was 2 separate independent trains that could meet a majority of the water standards. Or demands, sorry.
So you got, each train can do 100%
Each train can do 1 MGD.
MGD.
So if your peak day is 1.2, you may have to say no watering on your,
Is that 8,000 people? That's 1 million about, and you produce
Yeah.
2 MGD.
yeah.
And right now, if one skid goes down,
You are going to struggle to meet your average day.
Operate out of storage.
Yeah, they operate out of storage right now. And then they spend the next week
refilling everything.
trying to get back
Trying to
out.
catch back up.
Okay.
So we're trying to provide the operational resiliency that they have the ability to maintain it almost all the time. And then on their peak days, they will have to run both trains, but 95, 98% of the year, they'll run just one train and have the other one as backup. What I see actually in operations, and Sam, you can speak to this better than I can, but what I see typically is operators run both trains and just reduce the flow rates and
Right.
fluxes down. And then they try to, you'll design it for a 24-hour filter life, and they try to get 100 hours out of it.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. Pretty standard.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is usually when you're designing a filter, you backwash it once a day, but operators try to extend it to 4 or 5 days if they can. So. Any questions on kind of the relative comparisons between the two? Are all 4 technologies?
I will say I work in water, and it's still a little bit above my pay grade, so it's nice to have Sam
I'll
on
work in water
board
at
for this
all,
one.
so that-
Yeah. I do have one question on the additional storage, and this is probably for Trey. There's a subdivision that's been talking to us about potentially adding on to our water line, and they have a storage tank. Do you know how big their tank
I
is?
do not know how big that tank is.
Okay.
And I don't know when the last time they had it Dover inspected
Okay.
as well. So that could, if they do come on, that could be an option for a tank, but not knowing the condition of the tank,
Right.
it might not be a viable option
option.
also.
Okay.
Is it high enough in your system?
Yes, it's,
It's higher than any tank we have.
Okay.
yeah, I was gonna say, I'm trying, no, isn't it close to where the Sunrise tank's set?
No, it's up at the end of the subdivision. Clear up at the end of the road.
That's right.
Yeah.
It might be, yeah, it's a little higher than our highest tank,
I think, yeah.
so.
Okay.
I'm
Would
trying
that
to
be a
remember
good
exactly where it's at. Been a while since I seen it.
possible site for the new tank you're talking about, or?
It could be. I haven't been up I forget the
Yeah.
size
Yeah,
and
I
if
don't
it would handle,
I don't know
Too
anything.
far away,
yeah.
I mean, in discussions to know.
All right.
So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Curia for quickly to walk through the wastewater side of things. It's a little bit easier, and then we're talking about some conclusion recommendations. And I really want to talk about the project schedule because 2 of you asked about that, and that is it'll be a good discussion on ways to do that.
Patrick, did you say it was easier?
It's a little bit easier. Less academic, that's for
Well, I wouldn't say the price is easier.
The price, admittedly, yes.
Hey everyone. So for the wastewater treatment plant, you guys asked earlier about the flows and loads. So the current capacity is rated at 0.75 MGD. Right now, you're seeing around 0.23 MGD, so it's below that. And when we looked at the projections for 2042, the max month is 0.53 MGD. So still looking pretty good on the flow. You're gonna probably say at the same capacity, that 0.75, it will be good. Load is a little different story. So the load now is 1873, about 2,000 pounds per day in the permit. And it'll go up to max month in 2042 to 2083. So it will go above the permitted capacity for load, which is what these alternatives will help with, along with other things such as getting to Regulation 31, as Pat mentioned earlier. So the wastewater treatment plant is in the 100-year floodplain. The whole site is. However, it does not have an established flood elevation. The map stops right before the plant, and for the FEMA map. So all the tanks and equipment will have to be above that floodplain elevation. We could probably just take the upstream elevation. And then the headworks, the current headworks is working pretty well, although the HVAC is not working, and so it will need to be operational again and to be up to code to NFPA 820, which is the standard for fire protection. And then for screening, I believe, Trey, did you guys already install that new screen?
No, it's on order.
Okay, so there's already a new screen that will be installed. And then we also recommend putting in a manual screen for the bypass channel. For example, if the power goes out, then and the mechanical screen doesn't work, You use that manual bypass screen. And all the equipment seems to meet the projected future peak hour flow, which is 1.64 MGD. And then, so secondary process and digestion, you have sufficient capacity, but it won't meet the Regulation 31 requirements without upgrades. Next slide, please. And then disinfection, there's sufficient capacity to meet the future peak hour flow. Those are those UV channels that are in use now. Dewatering is nearing the end of its useful life. The belt filter press, you could get a more efficient system in there to upgrade that. And you can also upgrade polymer dosing control. The hydraulic profile, especially with the floodplain being so close, you're going to have to, or you'll have an issue with that with upgrades where we'll put in a pump station. And we'll talk about that in a little, or sorry, a lift station. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the discharge is currently, the outfall is not going directly into the Colorado River. And that could go into, you could extend that with a pipe to get that outfall actually into the Colorado River. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. Next slide, please. So short-term solutions and alternatives, the headwork screening and HVAC, which you guys are already working on. Dewatering, upgrading that belt filter press could be a short-term solution. And the extension of that outfall that I had mentioned. Any questions on those so far?
Wouldn't that outfall is going into that wetlands?
Mhm.
Isn't that saving them from because it's getting filtered out before you test it?
So it
Isn't that a godsend?
No, they're testing actually prior to the outfall.
Or are they?
But the permit is currently in renewal, and that is one of the arguments because it's in the floodway, but it's not actually discharging directly into the river. And so there is no dilution capacity that they're calculating into the equation.
Yep, so that's
Well said, Tony.
yeah.
That's a very politically correct way to summarize that.
They're also under there's a new permit writer coming in, so a lot of things are in limbo right now at the state.
Like, meaning we wouldn't be able to do the outfall into like the wetlands like it is? Or
There's an
like is the
argument that
preferred
it's-
way to just discharge it directly into the river?
It's kind of a double-edged sword there as well. You can't we can't put a pipe out into the river in the floodway.
Okay,
And so it is actually like right on the edge, but it could be an interpretation problem.
okay. And then can tell us more just about you're talking about like a new permit in progress, or is that for our town?
Correct.
Okay, so tell us about that.
Your current discharge permit is being renewed,
Okay,
and as part of it, that's one of the things that came up in the calculations on how they calculate the limits.
okay.
So like the permit that Patrick was talking about earlier, that's renewed every 5 years.
So is that permit that's up for renewal, is that part of the discussion of like the water credit that we get that gets discharged back into the river and then what we can pull out, or this is totally separate? This is just environmental regulations on the quality of the water that go back into the river?
Exactly.
That's it? Okay.
Yes, this is not a water rights.
Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, so just water quality.
Yep.
Okay. So where are we at in that process of renewal?
The state is,
The state, the lead permit writer, Meg, has moved on, and they are currently, I don't know who's taking over.
who's
yet.
taking it over?
Okay. I don't know what that means. Like, where are we at in
Don't
the
know what
process?
that
Like,
We
the
don't know.
beginning, the middle?
It's gonna be probably administratively extended for another year while they
Oh, okay.
find somebody.
Well, they find someone.
So what had happened was with the chemical evaluation forms were submitted, and the state has been revising the actual chemical evaluation form itself, and there's been a couple of revisions to that. And right now, they've basically asked for the request for the extension of the outfall,
Okay.
and then that's what we're still determining with Dewberry on how to proceed.
Oh, okay. So you guys are working together
Yep.
on behalf of the town as our engineers to determine how to respond to the regulators regarding the outfall for the new permit?
Yes.
Okay. I think I got that.
While they have
Yeah.
nobody to do the permit? I mean,
Right,
okay.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interpretation problem, and we just need the right person to speak to, but there's no need to.
Gotcha.
We've discussed this with the town's council as well, and they had advised that, like, depending upon how it proceeds with the state, Michael suggested that we may get another environmental council as well that specializes in that portion of it
Oh, gotcha.
to assist him.
To pin down the interpretation.
Correct.
Got it.
All right, next slide, please. So for the long-term alternatives for the wastewater treatment plant, the secondary process, we could either expand the existing Aeromod system and have tertiary nitrogen and phosphorus removal and filtration. Or we could do another process called the Johannesburg with tertiary nitrogen, phosphorus removal, and filtration to help us get to that regulation 31 limits. Disinfection, we could put in a new UV system. That UV system is the original system, so it's aging. And another option is chlorine. And then digestion, we could either do aerobic digestion or ATAD, which is thermophilic aerobic digestion. Basically, an activated sludge process that's used to stabilize and pasteurize sludge. Any questions so far on the long-term alternatives? All right, next slide, please. So this is a diagram that shows the expanding the Aeromod system. So you'd basically use the same basins that are already there, and then they'd put some new partitions, and it would need to expand just a little bit for some extra digesters, and expand the clarifiers a little bit. And you're basically taking the existing Aeromod system and making it a 5-stage Bardenfo. You can see the different stages there. They'd also add IFAS into the second stage and third stage. That's a fixed film technology where you have the microbes on a little pinwheels usually, and that's basically to help
Increase the solids concentration.
Ye-
Get more pigment.
yes, thanks.
Yep.
And the next slide, please. And here is a diagram for the Johannesburg. So this shows this is a 3-stage process. So you have anaerobic, anoxic, and then aerobic zones. And then you'd have external secondary clarifiers, which would also then go to aerobic digesters, which would also be external. Any questions on those flow diagrams? All right, next slide, please. So this is a site plan. Sorry, it's a little small for expanding the Aeromod system. You can see you have the existing basins that will be expanded a little bit with the digesters, and then it goes to a lift station, and then and then you have your tertiary filtration building that's kind of in the solar panel field over there. That's where you'll have nitrogen and phosphorus removal, and we'd use ozone and GAC in that building. And then that goes to a UV disinfection building. And then that will go out to the outfall, so that would be extended out to the Colorado River from there. Any questions on this site plan? All right, next slide, please. And then here's the Johannesburg site plan. So we'd be reusing the existing Aeromod concrete basin. We'd take out those partitions, those concrete walls in the middle, and that would be where our aerobic zones would be. And then we'll have those 3 new clarifiers, and then a process building for the return activated sludge and waste activated sludge pumps, and you can put blowers in there as well. And then the digesters are on the southwest side of the site there, those 4 boxes. And then it goes, or we'd have the new dewatering equipment in the same building that we are currently using for the dewatering. And then this also would use the lift station and then the tertiary treatment, UV, and then going out to the extended outfall. Next slide, please.
And these systems, you can shut down half of it if you need to do work on a portion of it and still keep everything running. That's a great question.
Yeah, great question. So the Johannesburg has a bit more, or quite a bit more capacity, about 2 times as much as expanding the Aeromod. So you would be able to shut down half of it and be able to treat a lot more wastewater compared to Aeromod. Would you like to add anything to that, Pat?
When Kyria gets to the cost in a bit, you're going to see the problem with the Aeromod is you cannot do that. The Johannesburg you can, and you'll see on the costs.
It's probably, yeah,
That's the rub.
gotcha.
However, if you grow faster and you need more capacity and you exceed the capacity of the Aeromod, that cost is going to make this cost difference look small. The Johannesburg, we can get through double what we can in the Aeromod. The reason why we can do that is the Aeromod typically takes about 32-ish hours to do their treatment. We can do it in 18 because we do it with more process controls, a little more intensification of the process. That's the primary difference.
Gotcha.
Great question, and you going right to the heart of the matter of this decision.
With the same number of people.
With the same number.
Oh,
Yes.
All right, and then here's a summary of the process improvements. So outfall extension would need to happen for both. Sludge handling improvements, same thing. Site civil, that's just your paving, grading, stormwater, things like that. Secondary process for Aeromod, it's the expanding the Aeromod system, and then Johannesburg, retrofitting the existing Aeromod system and then adding the other things. And then you would not need a process building for Aeromod expansion, but you would for the Johannesburg. And then all the other things are the same for both. Next slide, please. And so here's a summary of the total costs. You can see it's the same for those first 2 line items, and then site civils, a little more expensive for Johannesburg. There's a bit more paving and grading to do. Secondary process, you can see Johannesburg is a lot more expensive there because you're adding in a whole lot more equipment and processes. And then you have that process building cost for Johannesburg you do not have for Aeromod. Lift station, same for both. Tertiary treatment, disinfection is same. So then the total opinion of probable construction cost is about 52 million for Johannesburg. Aeromod's 30. And then the total project cost, so that's including admin costs and engineering and all that. And so that's about 36.5 for Aeromod and 62 for Johannesburg. So almost double
Almost
for
double.
Johannesburg.
What's the capacity difference between the two?
Or you can go ahead.
With the Johannesburg, with the Airmod, you will get, was it .5,
Point-
0.6
yeah,
basically,
yeah.
in 2,300 pounds. With the Johannesburg, we can probably get through 1.2 in like 4,600 pounds-ish.
So double, pretty much.
Pretty much double.
So that's the rub. If you grow really fast and you have to expand the Aeromod again, looking back at that site plan side, we'd have to double that. And you can see that cost difference, Chris, to your question, makes this one look
Yeah.
different or small. And that's the rub.
But if we just extended the Aeromod system, that accommodates the growth up to, I don't have, 2042 or whatever.
Yeah, about 8,000 people.
I mean, how many people would we need to have in Silt to even justify the Johannesburg?
If you get more than 8,000 people, then you're gonna want it. That's the problem.
Well, hold on. We're gonna want it or we're gonna need it?
You'll need it.
Based on, because even if I follow this right, like our current facility can meet the projected growth, it just can't meet Reg 31.
Nutrient
And
removal.
what's that?
Yeah, the nutrient removal.
Right.
So, right, that's what I'm seeing too.
So am I the only one why would we even consider the Johannesburg? That's an insane amount of money.
It is, but isn't the Aeromod basically your 20, 30-year plan and the Johannesburg your 50, 60-year plan?
You could look at it that way. One way to approach it is to monitor your growth for the next few years and then make the decision if you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you grow really fast, you might want to go to Johannesburg. If you grow slow, you might want to stick with the Aeromod. Because you don't have to make this decision now.
Yeah.
This doesn't have to be online until 2032.
All right, so there's plenty of time.
And is the only reason we're even looking at this because of that regulation?
Yes.
And one thing
outrageous.
Yeah.
one thing to consider too is that once you're over or at capacity for the Aeromod system,
Mm-hmm.
it will cost a lot more to have basically a new system
Yeah.
that will get you beyond that capacity.
Is that regulation only for discharging into like the river? Or is that different if you're somewhere geographically different and you're not discharging that back into a river like that? Like if it's going into a ditch or a creek, or I don't know, just,
Great question. The only way I have found around that.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask if Mr. Rodabal could speak into the microphone, please?
oh yeah.
Thank you.
The only way around that is if you can do aquifer storage and recovery and pump it down into an aquifer. At that point in time, you only have to meet a nitrate limit of 10, and you
Because
don't
it
have it.
percolates through the rest of the ground and that filters it
Well,
all
it's
out,
a
or
deep,
what?
you're injecting it into an aquifer, and then you have to meet the drinking water standards, which are different than the surface water
Sure,
discharge standards.
okay,
So anytime you discharge to a waterway,
yep,
it's Reg 31 limits.
got it.
Ditch, lake, stream,
Just basically anything above ground,
yes.
got it. You guys check for aquifers that we can pump this into, or no?
Now that's a water rights question. Tony?
Well, I mean, I suppose we'll get to that point, right? But because this is all based on some new regulation, I would have to imagine there's federal money available to help municipalities of our size. This is so far outside of our financial scope that,
We're gonna talk a little bit about money too.
Yeah, we'll
We're
talk
talking
about
about
the
money.
funding.
oh, okay,
I've been kicking that down the road.
got it,
Maybe-
okay.
Maybe, like 30 seconds or so on the reason for regulation 31. As we've just talked about, it's there and it
Mhm.
sounds so burdensome, but, and it may be
Try to give the
important to some.
30-second Reader's Digest view of Reg 31. So Reg 31 started with a concept in the late 80s called the EPA ecoregions concept, where they were starting to request that states and municipalities collect nutrient data so they can determine the impacts of nutrients on streams and rivers. And the state of Colorado collected all of that data, and in 2012 they basically published a study and basically started writing Reg 31. There have been numerous lookings at that study, but essentially what it is, it's the level of nitrogen and phosphorus that they can put into a stream that impacts the benthic organisms, with the thought being that the benthic organisms are then food for the fish. So if you're hurting the smallest organisms, you're also hurting the larger organisms. So those then got promulgated in 2014, I believe. I forgot Reg 31 when it got promulgated. Tony, do you remember?
I don't know the exact date that each
Yeah.
layer has came into effect, but it's been basically for the last 10 years.
Yeah. And then to push that and to help with that, the state implemented Reg 85, which is a technology-based standard, but then unfortunately they exempted every plant underneath 1 MGD, which was kind of detrimental to 1 MGD plants, because most plants then did it as a stepping stone. Their plants got to then upgrade, and they got to learn how to operate the plants, how to do it. They could do the research. And instead, the plants who didn't, like Silt, all of a sudden in 2032, you're getting hit with this very difficult to meet limit. And it's I do think it's a disservice that they didn't impose Reg 31 on everybody. So it's not just you that is worried about Reg 31. Almost everybody is on the nitrogen side. Phosphorus is okay. The nitrogen is going to be really difficult.
Okay.
Everybody up to Denver Metro is worried about the nitrogen one.
That's fair.
Is there a chance that it gets modified based on those concerns across that scale of communities? If they create a standard that no one can meet, what good is the standard?
I think the larger facilities will be able to do it. They'll have the staff, the expertise, the research, the data to do and operate it.
It's money.
That's what I was just gonna say, to your point, Kyle, that it's
Problem is
undoable fiscally. It's
This-
not
this-
that it's undoable technically.
This blows our annual budget out of the water.
For many
At
years.
$80 million,
years.
that's $23,000 a person
But
in
that's
town.
my point. They're gonna create
Yeah.
a regulation and a standard that, with the exception of Denver and a few other larger cities, no one else can meet it. I have to think that they're gonna find a means of compromise here.
They'd state throughout a compromise in 2017 called Policy 17-1. Unfortunately, many people ignored that because they believed that it did not impact them because Reg 85 did not impact them. In the state, maybe some could have said done a better job advertising it. Policy 17-1 allowed municipalities or people that were discharging wastewater, if they could treat their water a little bit better now, they can postpone those Reg 31 limits up to 10 years. So almost a large majority of municipalities joined in that policy and put off their Reg 31 discharge limits until 2042. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, Silt did not join the program, and the date has closed. We have been in discussions with people over at the state on this very issue, saying, yes, we can design a system that will meet Reg 31 limits, but we are unsure that some of these municipalities can operate them or pay to operate them or get the chemicals approved to operate them. And that is an ongoing discussion. I think it will be an ongoing discussion until Reg 31 gets implemented. So I very much sympathize and understand what you're saying, and we have taken those concerns to the people we can speak to at the state, which are the people presenting directly to the Water Quality Control Commission. And all we can do is keep
I find it hard
keep-
to believe
keep
they're gonna
pointing it out.
come up with a standard that bankrupts a third of the communities in the state. That just seems functionally impossible. They're not gonna make that decision, right? They're gonna either keep extending it or they're gonna have to compromise the levels.
I don't
Or
disagree.
they're gonna bankrupt what percentage of the communities in the state?
A lot of them.
It's an unattainable goal. It's unattainable fiscally, it's unattainable from a workforce perspective, and they know that now, even though it's not gonna be due for 10 years, 20 if for the communities that opted in. Even those that did probably won't be able to come up with $108 million in 20 years, or 40, or 80. So the length of time is irrelevant. That dollar value will never be attained by so many of these communities. This is DOA. As it stands, this Regulation 31 is going to change. It just is. We may disagree about the how, but it is functionally impossible to meet these requirements and not go bankrupt.
I agree with you, Derek. It's what I think the whole time when I see this. And it's
Th-
outrageous
this
to
is
look at
much
that
ado
amount of
about
money based
nothing
on a
to me,
regulation.
because
But
while we may need to improve these things, and I appreciate and agree with all of that, this standard is going to change.
Do you know by chance, did Glenwood, meet that with their last upgrade?
They don't meet Reg
Absolutely,
31,
yeah.
but I'm pretty sure their last upgrade, they're meeting policy 17-1.
Okay.
Is Snowmass meeting it?
We don't have regular 30, we have Reg 85, and our last upgrade just accomplished that.
So what's your effluent quality? I think Snowmass joined
one of the
policy
ones.
17-1.
Yeah, we're pretty good. I mean, we were like 0.02 milligrams per liter of nitrate going out the door. I mean, we're doing phenomenal up there.
Yeah.
And like 0.2 phosphate removal. I mean,
Perfect. So you're getting credits and you were putting off
Yeah.
your Reg 31.
that was a big upgrade. That was a lot of money.
Yes. To your point, Derek, yes, we are speaking to people over the state on that very issue because, and I don't know if the state knows what's going to happen. And all we can do is keep talking to them and reiterating those concerns that you're voicing for the
Let's
same
extend
very
the
reasons.
theoretical. What happens if we don't meet it? What do they do?
I think it's up to $50,000 a day per compound.
Which may end up being less than the net cost of the project.
It's also
Right?
unfortunate.
How many days do we have to suffer a 50K fine
It's
before we
also-
get to 62 million?
Unfortunately, it also includes the threat of putting people in jail. That's
his problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
No,
It's not me.
so Derek, to your point, I looked it up. Our 2022 budget projected revenue for the town is just over $7 million. $7 million.
So we're
And
10% of the way there.
Yes, like, so you're right. It'll either never be done, never be met, or they're just gonna have to come up with a way to help towns like us fund it and give us,
That's gonna be
85% of the money.
That's the more likely
We're gonna talk
scenario,
about
right?
that a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah. There are
But
definitely some
that's
funding
basically
options.
why we have the plant we have now, because the old one was so bad, the state said, you guys need to build a new one or else. So they've kind of already forced our hand already.
Yeah. Maybe that's why they,
But unfortunately, they bought the
Exactly,
bargain bin
yes.
water treatment
Uh-huh.
plant.
no doubt.
How long has the Johannesburg system existed?
Great question. Oddly enough, developed in Joburg in South Africa.
Okay, yeah, I thought.
Not surprising.
In the
Right.
God, it must have been in the 70s. So it's been around quite a while. Many plants operated. Clifton operates a version of it over here with their oxidation ditch. Louisville, Evans, and Durango also operate versions of it. It's a pretty forgiving treatment process. So you've got a little more flexibility to control the redox zones to maximize your treatment goals.
Is there a chance that over the course of the next 20 years, there's a better system in place?
I think that's why policy 17-1 came out, is that the state was trying to buy people time so that the technology could be developed and implemented that was a little more friendly.
Future-proof. Thank you.
All right, next slide, please. So this is just a summary of the short-term wastewater treatment plant costs. This is the same for both Aeromod and Johannesburg, outfall extension, sludge handling improvements. So the total project cost for these is about $2 million. Next slide, please. And then here's a summary of the long-term wastewater treatment plant costs. I'll just get down to the bottom here. So the total project cost for just the long-term things, so that's everything else we've talked about $34.5 million for Aeromod and 60 for Johannesburg. Average O&M costs is about the same for both, $957,000, $965,000, and then the net present value. So this is looking 20 years into the future. Is $74.3 million and $108.5 million. Next slide, please. So here's the alternatives matrix. Both of them are able to meet the 20-year flow and load projections, Reg 31. Aeromod has a higher chemical use than Johannesburg. Redundancy, there's more redundancy in the Johannesburg process. Expansion capability, same thing, more expansion capability for Johannesburg. You can increase the capacity by about 100%, whereas Aeromod, you would require significant infrastructure. Ease of operations, likely about the same for Aeromod expansion. Johannesburg is a new process, so that'll be a bit of training. Energy use is higher for Aeromod, and then construction feasibility. So Aeromod is feasible. They're both feasible at the current projected schedule. Since Aeromod has less capacity, if you wait longer to do that and then your population increases, then it may be a bit harder to get online just because you have to shut down one of those trains while you're making the improvements. Next slide, please. So just the conclusions and recommendations. Wastewater treatment plant is doing well for now. As we've talked about, we're just looking at that regulation 31. We can do it in the 2 phases. The first phase we'd recommend to be performed anytime in the next 5 years. And then the second phase will just have to be online by 2032 for Reg 31. And I'll hand it back over to Pat to discuss a few more things.
Alrighty, next slide, please. So this should say water plant conclusions, recommendations, and then the subtext getting to funding and scheduling. So the water plant is not in a great spot. Its operating capacity, and we would recommend upgrading the improvements in kind of 2 phases. The first one being a majority of the system upgrades to get yourselves back to 2 MGD. And then the second phase in the future would be to increase your capacity 3 MGD if you ever needed it. We could look at expanding the well field or the 4-bay pond to reduce the impacts of turbidity, but that's more of a want and not necessarily a need. On funding, I'm sure you've all heard about the federal money that came out through the American. Yes, there is a good amount of money that's available over the next 5 years. We have scheduled a pre-application meeting with the state August 4th. We'll be presenting this information to them, going over it. We have the planning document that will be also submitted to them necessary for the funding application to be submitted. That will all be released to them, published, so hopefully on August 4th we can get a good read on where we are sitting potentially for the different sources wise. A big majority of this funding that came out, it is all being published to the SRF program, the State Revolving Fund, And a good portion of that money has been set aside for loan forgiveness, and the state is working on the loan forgiveness criteria as we speak. Some people would call loan forgiveness a grant, but the state has made it very clear it is loan forgiveness. One of the major criteria that was written in there was median household income, and Jeff and I were just looking at the data a little bit ago, and I would say that data looks pretty favorable when you compared it to the state median household income. So hopefully on August 4th, we'll know some idea of what our funding options are and if we're going to be eligible for this loan forgiveness. On that date, then we'll start the loan application process immediately after that, provided we get the approvals, with money being available usually 4 to 5 months after that. Since time is of the essence, there are several other things we can look at, and the state has done things basically as like bridge loans if we want to keep working on things in the interim between the time the money's available and now. That might be for nice because in some aspects, when we were looking at getting quotes from some of this equipment, the lead times in some of the equipment ranged from 20 to 40 weeks. Lead times means the time we place the order to the time the equipment is delivered. To do that, there are several other things we could do, and that is looking at alternative delivery. Has anybody heard that term before? Conventionally, when projects in the water and wastewater industry have been put out and constructed, they do design, bid, build, where the engineer and contractor are two separate contracts. Two separate methods. The contractor bids to a hard set of contract documents. Alternative delivery, there's two primary forms. One is more of a CMGC, they call it. General Contractor Construction Manager, or alternatively known as Construction Manager at Risk. In that instance, the engineer and contractor are both contracted separately to the owner, but the engineer designs a project up to about 30%. We bring in a CMAR contractor. They then work hand in hand with the engineer to then value engineer the project as is being designed and pre-order any equipment with a long lead item. We can then control schedule. We can also get a better handle on costs. When you write those contracts, we basically write them so that at the, say, 90% level, we have a guaranteed maximum price that they will deliver the project for. We know all the costs ahead of time. We know the schedule. I have done this on a wastewater project for the town of city of Evans. And for that one example, the CMAR contractor came in and asked us to change the dimensions of our aeration basin, and we could save the project between $500,000 and $250,000 just by changing the dimensions to better fit their concrete forming system. I was totally blown away, but that was the number they quoted. You can also do design build, where you put out an RFP and engineering firms and contractors team up. The engineers contracted to the contractor. They then provide a price at that time to do the project, or you can do something called progressive design build, which is a merge of CMAR and conventional design build. I realize that's a lot of information, but essentially one of the big ways of moving a project forward faster with better cost surety and schedule control is using alternative delivery in the current market where the commodities market is often out of control. We have a project right now where unfortunately it was done conventionally, and the contractor actually came into the owner and said, I have a pipe quote for $200,000 if it were delivered today. It might be delivered in 8 weeks, it might be delivered in 24 weeks, and you will pay the price that it cost on the date of delivery. The contractor hard bid that job and is basically at a loss. They don't know what to do because the price of pipe might be $200,000, it might be $1 million, and will have to pay it. So alternative delivery has many benefits where we can control costs and schedule right off the bat, and if time is of the essence, it might be a nice way to proceed with the project. So that was a quick Reader's Digest view of both funding and schedule procurement ideas.
You know, we had the Garfield County Commissioners here not that long ago,
Uh-huh.
and I very specifically asked them about like the Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill that was over $1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And we could go back and listen to the tape, but they legitimately said we'll never get that money.
Oh, so I was just on a webinar with the EPA week and a half ago. And the EPA is very strongly pushing that this money go to smaller communities. Like
Good.
that is a major push, smaller and disadvantaged. So the state of Colorado, when I was on their webinar 2 weeks ago, they were in the process of developing that criteria. And then they said they're going to hire more people so they can enforce these criteria. And I think every person on the phone laughed because there's just nobody to hire. So
Sounds good, but it seems like money doesn't get past the Eisenhower Tunnel for over here. I mean, it's just a fact. Everything never makes it past the Front Range. It's great theory, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that was his point. It would, he said something to the effect that it'll be tied up in government regulation for so long that we, the town of Silt, will just not receive any of that money.
So we did the City of Durango's wastewater treatment plant upgrades, which is the largest state revolving fund project ever completed by the state. And that made it outside of the Front Range. That was $65 million.
When was that completed?
2020.
So that was before this bill was introduced.
That was
So
before
that's
this.
different money.
That was SRF money.
Yes.
This money, even the state of Colorado is acknowledging that they're making a major push that it gets out to these smaller communities because they do not want it sitting
Yeah.
in the large communities, which have a large customer base.
Mm-hmm. No, it's good. And I don't mean to like portray our frustrations on you guys regarding the financial part of this, but you know, you see it. I mean,
I'm going to tell you, it's no fun sitting up here delivering a message
No,
that
I
this is
believe
what
it,
it costs. It really stinks.
yeah,
And we're here to just try to give you an idea.
you bet.
And currently, particularly in the market, like alternative delivery is very nice because it's cost control and schedule control.
Yeah.
We can lock in costs early.
What are the downsides?
I would say there are some people that say it doesn't save time and money. On the Evans project, we knocked off about 8 to 10 months, and we were able to control cost. We had a fixed budget of about $40 million.
When was that project?
That was completed in 2019, 2018.
Because right now, I don't know how you would be able to control costs with the supplier saying you're out of luck.
I don't disagree, but where I think the advantage comes in a CMAR is they can say, I could get a steel building if we order it within the next 30 days.
I see.
That's the advantage. Whereas if you do design hard bid,
Yeah.
it's whatever day they order the building.
Mm-hmm.
With an alternative delivery, we can selectively procure materials when it appears to be most advantageous.
Right.
So that project you mentioned in Durango, was that just water treatment plant or was that wastewater?
That was a
also?
wastewater plant.
Just a wastewater plant.
It is the most beautiful wastewater plant.
So
you
it
will
was
see.
60 what?
65 million.
So roughly what we're looking at. And what was their projected timeout for what, 2040 also, or?
Unfortunately for them, they were running into an ammonia permit limit in 2018 that they couldn't meet.
Okay.
So we had to get half the plant online by mid 2018,
Yeah.
and we did it. And then the rest of the plant came on after that and was finished in December 2020.
What's Durango's population?
Right now, about 18,000.
What was their projected population?
Growing up to I think 32.
We have 3,600 people with a projected population of a third of that, and we're looking at the same amount of money. Doesn't make sense.
Construction costs in the last year have
skyrocketed.
went up 50%. I mean, so from 2018 to 2022, it's
Man.
it's ridiculous.
No kidding.
well,
All right.
Yeah. So we have.
I don't know.
I would love to tell you that we are shooting high on those costs, but to your point, I'm not.
No,
No,
I don't think they're.
At
Yeah,
all.
we have our suppliers right now are locking in prices for 15 days.
That's it?
That's it.
Yeah.
When I started in this business, the cost of installed concrete was about $300 a yard, and right now it's about $1,400.
All right.
Yeah.
So is there a plan to move forward, with the funds we do have to do something with the water plant? Circle back to my worst case scenario, or what's gonna happen from today on?
So the soonest we can get a pre-application meeting, that's the first step in the funding process, is August 4th. They are overloaded, and so that is the first day we have available. So that will start the process. And based on Silt's needs and my experience with the funding people, I can't see a reason why it wouldn't be funded. I don't work for the state, but I think that's the route that we probably need to vet out on that August 4th meeting.
And is that funding for wastewater or water treatment?
Water.
Just only water?
Yeah. We will submit it also for wastewater, but there's those needs aren't required till 2032.
Right.
Yeah.
So nothing's gonna happen until August 4th
Well,
for the water plant?
we are doing some upgrades at the water plant with the grant we got last year and some money we had, like the controls on the water plant and things like that. We are doing some upgrades to keep this one running as long as we can while we figure out the money and getting the next one built.
And how long from breaking ground to the new plant being online? Any,
Great question. That's why I brought up the delivery schedule. So the sooner the design starts, and if you're doing alternative delivery, the big key point is getting to the 30% level and getting a contractor on board. And that process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Getting them and getting those documents done so they can tell us right away, hey, let's order this equipment. This is delivery schedule. This is the type of building we want to have. I need to get this done because steel buildings are cheap. Or, hey, I can get masonry block. I've got a mason that needs some work. Whatever the case may be, depending on building type or et cetera. We recently did a design build project for the town of Superior's water plant, and we designed, constructed, and built a GAC system in under 6 months. It goes live July 15th, so.
so we're potentially talking, I mean, if everything went great, we could potentially have a water plant in a year and a half?
If everything went great, I would say a year and a half. If it went really great, a year.
All right. I mean, I'm okay with great, so.
I just want to be clear and set expectations, like.
All right. And are we talking, I mean, is this funding at the state level, this loan 100%, or is it a matching?
There are many different options available. The grants tend to require matching funds, but those are very small dollar. Like a lot of them are $50,000 or $100,000. That doesn't do much on a $25 million.
Yeah.
You bet.
Right.
The loans, there is a significant amount of money that I wish I could remember the percent. I have forgotten it. That is going to have a loan forgiveness portion. That is the part that came out under this American Investment Act. And there are 8 factors that the state is working on developing to set those criteria. And a lot of it is based on small and rural communities. A big portion of that is the median household income, and that is below this Silt's below the state average.
I don't
Yeah,
know that.
I looked at the state average.
Okay, good.
So I would say that would put Silt in a very good position to hopefully receive part of that. Can I account for that? I don't work for the state.
Right.
So, but we'll advocate for that.
And you'll recall that we had been having conversations with a whole bunch of state outfits after the mudslide. And so they're already aware, and we've kind of prepared the ground, and there's a few people in that group that were really interested in helping us. You know, unknown what their level of interest is today, but now as we get closer to the actual official conversations, I guess, I guess we'll see. But I don't know that we have a better way forward, and I haven't heard from anybody that, you know, there's anything better. And I don't know what the alternatives are. Now that we know what the numbers are, we can talk with Michael Arian about, you know, rate structures and things like that to see what these rates might be if we didn't get these loans. Questions I have are, yeah, it's a loan forgiveness program, but is the loan forgiveness program guaranteed, or is it a loan and then they do a bait and switch at some point?
Sure.
I mean, we're still not to the point where we can say for sure.
The first step in this whole program is having this P&A document pulled together, of which you just got the overview.
Yeah.
And Trey's got some work to do on a document by the end of the week, actually by Thursday. And then I think Carrie is doing some other stuff that needs to be done by the end of the week. So we're moving forward as though we were gonna go for those federal dollars or state revolving fund dollars, which come from the federal government. And I think tonight, what we're looking for from you is just kind of a head bob, is to keep moving and let's go forward with this meeting on the 4th and report back to you and let you know where we are and what we're thinking.
Yep.
I don't think there's any other option.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hire a grant writer, a really good water grant writer.
These guys do a good job, sounds like.
I think we got it right here.
We have
one on
grant
contract?
writers. We will be pulling them in.
And, right, assuming we need them.
Yeah.
We may not, I mean, maybe we won't even need.
I mean, there are many different funding sources available. When we looked at them before, the biggest one is the SRF program, and all of this money coming from the American, this most recent federal dump is getting shipped to the states as basically a block grant under the SRF program.
Gotcha. And then when would we get Michael Arian available to just discuss the financial part of this, to see what our options are? After the 4th, before that?
We could probably do that before that.
I can give him a call this week and
Yeah.
chat with him.
I mean, it would be interesting for him to look at these numbers and then to just kind of look at the overall picture and
I
kind of
think
get
it's
his
important
idea.
to the conversation to know what is the alternative for us to fund a bond issue
Yeah,
or
right,
something.
right. All right.
Because we need to know what we're saving by going with the state program, if any.
If any, yeah.
Hopefully loan forgiveness, we're saving 100%. I'm looking at the positive side of this.
Sounds very promising.
Yeah,
doesn't
You
it?
there.
Just out of curiosity, what are the nitrogen levels in the river?
Great question. The data I have seen currently is it's very close to that level in the regulation. It would probably behoove Silt to collect some data periodically so they could document it, and if they could get some dilution credit. So, for example, if the level in the river is lower, your TN limit goes higher because you can use up that capacity in the river.
Oh, okay.
So you've got time.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good question.
So in the short term, there's some small things that maybe didn't get listed, like data collection and like data management systems that are included in these conclusions that we did not go into because they're such small line items.
All right.
But great question.
That seems like a great thing to have, like the CSU extension do for,
USGS, the USGS collects some data.
yeah.
But the other data that like should probably collect is you can figure out your own unbiodegradable nitrogen fraction and track it seasonally. Things like that.
All right.
Well,
There you have it.
that was enlightening.
Yeah, it's very, yeah.
Looks good on paper. See how.
Looks terrible on paper, man.
I guess I have one more question. Wastewater treatment plant. Which option is going to smell better?
You mean at the plant?
I mean,
Or-
there's some towns you drive by and you cannot smell anything at their treatment plant, and there are other ones that stink. I mean, that could be a huge thing with,
All the
Typically,
development that's going on over there?
That's typically a malfunction.
I would agree with
operation
Sam.
malfunction.
is that what you think it is? Okay.
It typically has to do with the way people are operating it.
Operating the plant.
I'm not going to say they are smell free because that is a misnomer, but if you are operating it correctly, you can minimize the potential for offsite odor mitigation. Now, most plants that do have odors have really stale wastewater and probably have a lift station that's oversized or something, or their digester goes septic, which all things you can minimize with a good design system. If you go to the city of Durango's plant, they were getting an odor complaint almost weekly, and they have had one since the new plant came online in 2.5 years.
All right.
So if you're in Durango, the plant is on the west side of the railroad as you're coming into town. I doubt you'll smell it, but it looks really pretty.
That looks really pretty.
They paid a premium to have a very nice looking plant. It's
And
right
that's-
next to their whitewater park.
Okay. And that's one thing I'm always against with municipalities is spending money for buildings to look pretty. I'm way over function is my priority.
Gotcha.
I think you can waste a ton of money making a building look pretty that does nothing for your citizens.
Omass is underground,
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful one.
in the middle of a golf course.
In the middle of a golf course. So. Yeah.
Because you don't see it.
You don't see it, yeah.
That's cool.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, guys.
Wonderful
Thank you.
presentation.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Jeff. You gotta buy a lotto ticket so you win this
That's
big
right.
money, and then you can donate it. We don't have to worry about it. Takes care of all of our problems.
That's exactly what I would do with that money, Jim.
I'm sure you are.
That is
We'll never
mine,
see
Jared.
him ever again.
That'll
if
be
he
the
won
first check you write out.
money.
Absolutely.
Right.
I believe that is on record now, so.
Oh, shucks.
Right before the resignation.
It picks up sarcasm.
You need a few minutes to stretch your legs?
Man.
That's gonna
I'm
be late
legal
enough
fast.
as it is.
Already.
Nine, well, yeah,
Plow through this.
Okay.
11.
I know. Hopefully.
That one took 2 hours.
All right, the next,
Yes, it did.
You would.
Will the owl follow me or should I go?
Yeah.
Should.
Yeah.
The owl follow me?
Yeah.
I guess I'll just find out.
Just need to-
We'll see.
Well, it's not gonna follow you because it's really on the
Sorry that one took so long.
Thanks for your patience.
Sheila said you were gonna.
All right. Next item on the agenda is is it Rislinda or Rislindi?
Rislinda.
Rislinda, Planned Unit Development, Rezoning and Subdivision Sketch Plan, AKA the Divide Creek Center PUD. This is a public hearing, but I will turn it over to Planner Chain.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, let me touch base on one thing that Jerry brought up. And a lot of times when you hear, here are potential developments, everybody thinks that they happen right away. I like to use the term, development it isn't an event that just happens, it's a process. And a lot of times, most times, they take a lot longer than you think. Stony Ridge. Okay, it started 20 years ago. Camarillo pretty close to that.
Right.
And Divide Creek Center's also been in the development process. So just because we have a list of 10 or 15 doesn't mean they're all coming in and developing right away. You put in interest rates going higher, you put in economic cycles.
Sure.
And it tends to happen slower than you think. Occasionally, it does happen all at once, but I don't think you're at that point. So let me go into this application. It's been a long night, and we have some time allocated for this, but I'm going to just give a very, very brief introduction, and then I'll let the applicants go through and basically update you on what their vision is for the property. Then you can ask questions, then I can come in and see where we are with time. Should I finish the staff report or wait for it for next meeting? I expect this to be at least 2 meetings to go through before you're ready to give direction, and then we would have approval documents. The applicant is August Group LLC. Mitchell Weimer is right here. I don't think Cole's with you tonight. And it's a PUD rezoning and a subdivision sketch plan. So it's a rezoning for the entire property. That would be approved by ordinance. And it's a subdivision sketch plan. Basically, you're at the very beginning, there's 9 tracks being outlined. And the sketch plan, you start with the concept, and the next thing you'll have a preliminary subdivision plat where you'll see detailed information. And finally, the final plat, which is more or less more paperwork and setting up the agreements. And that's going to take a while. And after that, each of these tracks are going to have a site plan review. So it's not like this is happening either in 1 or 2 months. By the time we get to site plan review, if things are going quickly, maybe you'll be seeing it 9 months, maybe a little bit longer than 9 months from now. Sheila, could you make me the co-host or whatever I'm going to be for a second? Okay, let me just... Okay. Well, that's not, oh, there. Did that, okay, there we go, okay. Okay, just to give a couple minutes of quick comments. Okay, I basically outlined for you what a PUD rezoning and the sketch plan and the entire process for this is. It's the old Divide Creek property. It's 51.1 acres in size. I'm locating it, you can see it right here in this location map. And directly across the other way of I-70 is the Silt Trade Center. And right here, which was originally part of the Divide Creek Center also, is the BLM building. So for background, I believe that BLM parcel was subject to a minor subdivision approval with this project in 2007 and 2013. I think there was approval of the Divide Creek Center itself. That has not been developed at this time. There are 9 tracks that are being proposed for the project. Here they are. BLM is in this area, the northeast corner. And what Richland is, I'll just call it a mixed-use development featuring an event center at the river area. There is some residential lodging right around the event center. And there is some commercial mixed-use projects right here. There is an island area right there, which when you're out there on site, it doesn't really look like an island. There was an old channel through here. Definitely can get wet sometimes, and that's 11.7 acres. And then there's about 15 acres that are in the river itself. Just in terms of general parameters, the entire Residential section could be 160 units total. And that would also include at the northeast corner, up to 72 units. Dennis Kruth would be working on developing that in the future. A couple other things to note, the heights vary in the various zone district. And in some of the districts, they are proposed to be 40 feet high. One of your zone districts allows 45 feet in height. But 40 feet is actually good height if you're going to 3 stories, because you want to have nice retail or commercial space, they tend to have a taller ceiling. Second floor could be offices or whatnot, and then if you have a 35-foot height, you get pinched on that third floor if you're looking for nice residential. So I think 40 feet in height is an awful good height for what they're proposing right now. I've recommended approval with the rezoning. The sketch plan has worked out pretty well so far also. One thing I would like you to consider, and I will be recommending approval. I want to give them, why everybody's a little bit fresh to go through. One thing I'd like you to consider is right now the site plan review, the board doesn't see a site plan review unless there is an appeal. Site plan review as the code is now written, it stops the planning commission with the exception of appeal. And I think this could bring a newer, a good kind of development to the town. I think it's a good opportunity. And I think you would either want to see the site plan reviews or at least have the ability to call them up. So first couple phases go good, things are going well, maybe you won't need to see them. But it's just something to think about, and that is one of my recommendations to you. And right now, I want to hand it over to Doug and Mitchell and team to do their vision, and then we'll follow up with some questions, and then back to me for the rest of the staff report.
All right, thank you.
Try to see if I can present.
And I am no longer the co-host, so.
You are still a co-host, you're just not sharing your screen.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So basically, Mitchell, you would like to be the co-host, correct?
Well, just so that I can,
Yeah, we just had a short slide presentation to go through.
Yeah.
it's the same slides,
I
gentlemen,
believe
that's in the
he's sharing
packet.
his screen.
Yeah,
Someone is sharing their screen. I made him a co-host so he was able to.
I'm trying to get down to those slides. 'Cause it's the same slides, gentlemen, that was in the packet. Here we go.
So I think you may be sharing the wrong screen. So why don't you stop sharing? And then select what you want to share.
So I'm gonna share
Yeah, I think you're
this.
yeah, that's it.
There we go. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Oh, you're good.
All right, so you wanna kick it off there, Doug?
Yeah, so my name is Doug Pratt. I'm with Land Studio. Julie and I have been working with Mitchell Weimer and Cole Berger and Dennis Caruth on this project. Just so you know, also Roger Neal at High Country Engineering is the engineer that's been working with us. Chad Lee at Bachman Green is the land use attorney. So this is a sketch plan PUD application, as Mark said, and we have kind of a brief presentation to kind of give you an overview of the project. As a little background, we do support staff's recommendation for approval, so we hope we get to that point with you. But in this process, we're going to just give you some, a little bit of overview of what the project is. We did go ahead and send this to Mark so that you guys had generally what our presentation is if you want to look at it ahead of time. So we'll be kind of brief here going through it.
So, yeah, not to bore you guys, especially on the tail of the last topic, but I think Planner Chain hit up the history, fairly well. So this land is within town limits.
right? So it was part of an annexation agreement back in 2007. The board at that time brought it into the town and carved out that exemption for the BLM office. Jump ahead 6 years later, right? So 2013, the original annexation and development agreement was restated, right? So it became from an ADA to an AR ADA, as well as a planned unit development. So there was a PUD, a PUD, a PUD that was developed in 2013 for multifamily residential units. Mr. Caruth here to my right was a part of that in 2013. And for several reasons, over the last 9 years, the parcel has sat largely undeveloped. So I think the Hoods are running cattle on it, growing some alfalfa or hay or something of that type. But other than that, it's just really kind of just sitting there. Cole and I have had our eyes on this piece of land for as long as, you know, we think back. Cole grew up just up Dry Hollow. We've been driving by that corner for a long time and have had our eye on it. It was fortunate, really, that how things have sort of worked the way they have. Last year, March, we put an offer in on the land. It was accepted. We've been working through this process now since that time. Dennis is going to keep that northeast corner for 72 multifamily units. Cole and I, as August Group LLC, are going to take the rest of it over. We're fixing to do, you know, as Mark said, a really pretty robust mixed-use development over time. And it's going to happen under the banner, sort of the marketing banner of Rislenda, which is a Danish word. I'm not Danish, but it's just a good word. It means rippling, and it kind of comes from the river, the rippling, but also you imagine sort of still water. You put your finger into it, you create ripples that expand in all directions, and that's sort of very in line with the way that we're trying to make an impact on the valley. 2022, here we are. We've got the new PUD, the third errata, and the site plan in action. We are working in parallel on the engineering work, preliminary plan, final plat. We'll have that in front of you guys later this summer, is our hope. And then followed closely behind that with site plans that allow us to actually start moving dirt around and building vertically. So that's sort of where we are now. I was in front of this board about 11 months ago. It was virtual. I might have been in New Jersey. I don't remember exactly where I was, who was even in this room. So I apologize if some of this is reiterative or if I've not met you before, but you know, we're really thinking about this as being a bit of a campus in that the buildings are all interrelated functionally, aesthetically, but then there's also quite a bit of open green space between the buildings that are both used and sort of just viewed, right? So sort of active gardens and then just sort of inactive gardens. We think that what we're trying to do here is going to become highly desirable, not just for Silt, not just for the valley, but for the greater, really western Colorado region and beyond. And I don't think I'm being unrealistic there. The market research that we've done, the availability of these sorts of features, I really expect us to make a solid impact across a pretty wide area. We've talked about the 9 zones already. There is a bit of a development timeline built with respect to those zones. The next sort of slides take us through almost in time, right? So tract one is sort of up first. That'll be the first slide we sort of talk about. But Dennis's multifamily residential, a restaurant concept we're calling the Beacon. There's the event center, some riverfront cottages, and then on further down the line, some true, sort of more traditional mixed-use development, as well as some potential single-family residential right there by the river. So first up, the multifamily. Again, this is in the northeast corner of the tract. You can sort of see on each of these slides, we've highlighted where this is, right, just as a reminder. So this is up in that northeast corner. It's about 3.8 acres. I think Dennis is looking at something like 72 units, right? 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, topping out at about 3 stories.
3, yeah.
Yep. Tract number 3 is what we're calling the Beacon, and you can see there in the red, sort of the land we're talking about. So it's an indoor-outdoor restaurant concept with a market that will highly leverage the outdoor environment, right? So a lot of hanging out on the lawn and throwing a frisbee and eating a burger and drinking wine and just hanging out with your family and your friends and listening to live music and really just sort of enjoying the environmental atmosphere that we're trying to protect as well as enhance down there. The center of the island will be an additional sort of area or space related to the Beacon. We'll have a couple of footbridges that we're gonna need to engineer and get folks across onto the island, where there'll just be more open space, and there'll be lighting, and there'll be music, and we could have host a play, a Shakespeare in the Park, or some sort of cultural events, I think, as well as just sort of daily, cool things to do and see. And all of the photos on here, really just intention, the intention here is just to provide some level of inspiration and aspiration that this is the sort of aesthetic, this is the sort of feel that we are striving to deliver when we do this stuff. The event center, down there right by the river, we're trying to get literally as close to the water as we can. Think of a glass, sort of glass-lined building, and really we're targeting weddings will probably be our bread and butter, but I don't necessarily need to be or want to be in the wedding business, but I just know that that's going to be a thing. But think of also, corporate events, quinceañeras, anniversaries, annual dinners, all of those things that we in our lives try to find space for. We think we're going to provide a really attractive and higher end option. Again, not just for Silt, but you look down there bottom center, that's driving distances to the site, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and 120 minutes. So it's impacting a pretty large footprint. Riverfront cottages, not to be confused with the tiny homes down by the KOA. This is a very different intent, purpose, look and feel. But the idea is that we've got some number of riverfront cottages sort of there between, if you can kind of refer to the squares there, sort of between the event center and the Beacon, right along that canal that we're intending to sort of widen and deepen so that it does flow 12 months a year. Places for you and your buddies to stay and fish and the wedding party or out-of-town guests or just people passing through the valley. What an amazing sort of environment and experience we can provide these guys, or provide our guests with these sorts of things. Bike and pedestrian paths. Before I get to sort of the final bits of the the development, I think it's important to show how local visitors, local residents can access us without having to get on the freeway and drive, right, 30 minutes to come see us. And so there's ongoing work around how Rislenda can and should connect to non-motorized avenues in town and across the valley, right? So a lot of you guys probably know of LOVA, right? The Lower Valley Regional Trail Plan. Their plan's not locked in sand, let alone stone, but you know, the idea is to connect South Canyon to Parachute. And what an amazing opportunity it would be for us to be a part of that regional trail. And so you see that regional trail potential along the northern edge of our boundary here. The dark brown to the left, that's existing trail. That's your 16th Street connector that then moves to the west, south across the frontage road to the Holiday Inn parking lot. And then the brighter red will essentially be our purpose-built public paths, right? It's not on LOVA, it's not on Silt, it's on Dennis and us, frankly, to build out these trails. But the idea is to connect to the wider avenues, get those people onto our property so that they can enjoy themselves. And part of that is connecting east and west, but also giving them an opportunity to get out onto the island. Parkland is a big deal for us, and I think it's also a big topic, right? Because as you guys know, anytime a developer comes to you and wants to do a subdivision, they owe you parkland, right? Often they have to carve it out and they say, all right, this bit I'm giving to the town, and this is your park. There's options around that. You can either give the town land, give the town money in lieu of land, or give the town the opportunity to enjoy parkland while it's still being privately managed and maintained. And we're going after that third option. So at the end of the day, we're going to be providing, or the offer is to provide the town of Silt with more than the parkland we would owe you otherwise, and own it, operate it, and maintain it privately. That allows us to build it and manage it and maintain it to our own purpose and liking. I can selfishly landscape it the way I want to landscape it, right, without having to go through the bureaucracy or try to twist arms. And it also, I think, is super integrated into the rest of the plan, that it's not just carved out corner that we give to another organization to kind of set it and forget it. So that it becomes a real sort of incorporated part of the plan here. And then longer term, I don't have graphics or anything to show you, but along the northern sort of tier of parcels there, with the red squares, that's just prime down the line for higher density, mixed use development, right? Again, small footprint because we want to really manage green space, open space, the feel and look of a campus. But where we do develop, it's dense, and we go a little bit more vertical than we would horizontal. And that would be things like, obviously residential, but then also store frontage, restaurants, arts, and other retail sort of opportunities. And we have written into our PUD that commercial is to not be more than 50% of square footage, right? So if I want to build 1,000 square feet of commercial, I have to match it with at least 1,000 square feet of residential. And the point there is to really ensure that we create a live, work, play sort of environment, and it doesn't just become a strip mall that we're all detached from. Our next steps tonight, obviously, this is a discussion. There will be likely a follow-on, conversation with you all, to make sure that we're all sort of locked and aligned with this. We've got some open conversation with staff already. Let's bring you guys into that loop and understand where we are and sort of your perspective and how you're thinking about some of these pieces. And then, as I said at the top of the deal, we've got the preliminary, we've got the final plat, et cetera, in front of us that will be back in front of you guys again to get those reviewed and approved. So that's the spiel. Hopefully it gives you guys a good sense of our vision and how we're thinking about taking advantage of an amazing piece of property down there. And if you guys have questions or if anybody wants to add anything to what I've said, I think this now becomes sort of a question-answer conversation situation. Back to you, Mark.
Board, like to ask them questions while this is fresh in your mind?
Anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Maybe I'm too early in the process here, but do you have any general idea on what percentage of the overall residential units would be affordable?
I don't.
That comes up at what point then?
It would come up during site plan. When we actually have now, all right, in that top center part of the development, here's what we want to do. We want to put in X, Y, and Z and at this number and that sort of a thing. And that becomes a conversation about how many are market rate, how many are affordable, that sort of a thing. So it would be at that other, or at that later stage that we have those conversations.
And will that apply to ownership as well as rental? Some sort of a rent control mechanism, or are you simply intending for them all to be sold?
I have no intention either way at this point. It's years away, to be quite honest with you, right? And we have ordered the development very intentionally here, right? First thing, let's get a nice, amazing sort of outdoor, indoor restaurant concept up and running so that people are now attracted to the parcel at large, that we're developing a brand, that we're establishing foot traffic, that we're starting to understand what the overall draw is. And then you start to recognize the complementary pieces to go after, right? That otherwise, you plunk down, all 9 tracks worth of development and realize that you're not hitting the mark, right? And so a very sort of organic progression, I think, is a smarter way for us to proceed.
Could I?
Please.
So, I'm Dennis Caruth. I'm retaining about 4 acres in the northeast corner right across from BLM for multifamily. And it's intended to be a rental apartment community. Been working for a couple of years to get Jaffa credits to do what would be a more affordable type project. And those Jaffa credits have not been granted 2 years in a row. So my plan now is to move forward on a market rate basis and really provide housing that meets the market demand at whatever those numbers look like in a quality way. And I think you can see from the colors and materials and so forth, we'll do a quality project, and it's not going to be, it'll be nice, reasonably priced, but not affordable housing.
I've got 2 things. Planet Channel, I'll ask you a quick question, but maybe just to follow up on that. Like I wouldn't be in favor of, when you guys get to that point, trying to mandate that you do any sort of affordable housing type of thing, whether it be on apartment rentals and or multifamily type stuff. I mean, market rate's market rate. We just need housing. So I wouldn't muddy the waters with that. So I have a question as it goes to the rezoning of this. As I read through all of this, were any of the building requirements in the zoning changed as part of the request? Or are those all part of our written code when we talk about buildings being a maximum of 40 feet high versus 35 feet, size of the building being, 30,000 square feet, et cetera?
Most of the standards were taken from town code.
Okay.
It's hard to line up specifically
know.
some of the town's underlying districts with their districts.
Yep.
For the commercial and mixed use, the massing is probably less and less intensive according to their plan.
Okay, right.
At a-
Well, and you guys, I guess you guys would know that too, as you're building your sketch plan and looking at the town's code for these sizes. I mean, did you have any discussions about trying to go larger than or higher, than what the Silt's code in those particular zoning districts mandate?
Well, I'll just give you just our process beyond what you're looking at in this application was also to look at a site plan, which you're not privy to, but
Right.
to try and test out, we have X number of square feet of building, X number of square feet of this type of use requires X number of parking spaces. So we've kind of done a test that I'm not sure we can go much denser than what we've proposed and still provide the parking that we've put in the PUD guide. So it's a little bit of a balance, so that was kind of our approach, was to kind of do a site test, look at the zoning. Dennis has done a more detailed site test with his 72 units and the parking required for that. We've done it on the rest of the site. You'll be privy to that when we come in for site plan review for all of that. But that has been kind of a test, is just to see, okay, how does this pencil out on paper, and is the parking adequate based on the size of buildings and footprints that we've proposed in the PUD guide? So.
Okay. Yeah. I was also, go ahead,
Okay.
Planning Change.
No, go ahead before I come out with a couple
Yeah,
comments.
I wanted to make another point. I read in the breakdown in the application, I believe, is tract 1 the one that's on the far northeast corner?
Yes.
Is that the tract that you were proposing to use municipal water for irrigation? For that, I mean, that's definitely something that we would maybe want to discuss, and we had that huge discussion 2 hours before you about our water needs, and I don't know that we're in a position to provide irrigation water with our treated water, being that we're already almost at our maximum
Just with
capacity.
Just with the proposed units that you've mentioned, that's 40,000 gallons a day that we're gonna put on our water plant.
Yeah.
That's without the irrigation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, okay. Specifically with their plan, there's a well there, Silt well
Saw
number
that.
2, but that's gonna be tossed out, and they're gonna drill a new well.
Yeah.
Which will be used for irrigation.
Well, but
'cause-
not on that particular track though, right? I wonder, was there a reason why that track maybe wouldn't be irrigated with that well water? Is it the infrastructure to get it to that track based on how you plan to develop it? Or was that maybe your preference with the 4 acres that you're gonna keep?
So the timing for development of that tract probably precedes the timing for development of that well and the rest of the property that's going to be served by that well. So, it's our thought that it would not be that water intensive. We do xeriscape landscaping and not have a lot of demand for exterior irrigation, certainly do that within town code. And it'd be it'd be pretty much what's happened across the street at BLM.
Okay, got it.
We intend to be very smart with our water, period, right? And that's just, I think that needs to be said.
I appreciate that. It's one thing for you to say that you want to be smart, right, and conservative, but depending on what we approve and allow you to do, once that's done, it doesn't mean you have to be that way. You can change your mind and say, well,
I've got my own well.
yeah, if you use it, right, for his tract or whatever, so.
But I think the good news in there, in as much as it's good news, but when that particular piece was annexed into the town, the water rights were annexed with it. They were granted to the city, and I think in return, it's something like 213 EQRs have been afforded back to
That's
us, right?
correct.
Which was pretty copacetic with that first the first plant, right? All of those multifamily or single-family houses. We've done some calculations, and even at full development, the way this is sort of being teased up,
Yep.
we're not gonna be anywhere near that 213.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah, yeah. I
that's-
mean, it's a fair point that you
That's
make
the
on
good,
that.
that's the good news.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And maybe,
just to add clarity to that,
Yeah.
several years ago, and I don't remember, maybe Jeff, you recall, but I dedicated 4 shares of the Grand River Ditch to the town with the right to use part of that for agricultural irrigation, which Joe Hood has been doing now for a number of years. So those 4 shares belong to the town,
right.
as long as this development proceeds.
The reason I only bring that up as it relates to using municipal water, right? So treated water is it's not a question of the availability of the water. It's more our capacity to deliver treated water to you, which was the point that Trustee Flores was bringing up. And my point to that would be, there's going to be growth in the town of Silt regardless, right? So, and we need the growth in Silt to pay for the upgrades that need to be done, right? I mean, that's where the money comes from. So the citizens coming to town, and then when we take 51 acres of property and it gets developed, well, as it gets developed, the property value goes up. We get more property taxes to help fund the infrastructure that we need to improve. So it kind of goes hand in hand, if that makes sense.
I don't see that.
Yeah, Trustee Knott, this is Attorney Sawyer. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I just want to note, I've kind of typed a email to the Rizlinda team about this. I think there's a good possibility that we could get another raw water irrigation well decreed and in place over on the eastern side of the property.
Okay.
So that a well did not have to be developed on the west side and then piped over at the initial phase. And that's something we can explore. That will, I think substantially reduce the capacity issue at the water treatment plant that you have properly articulated.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You have a lot of opportunities. The more you can have untreated water for irrigation, that helps with your plant cost. But
You
let
bet.
me come back to a couple other questions. I don't agree with Mitchell about, you'll see affordable housing or a proposal for that when it comes to site plan review. Basically, this approval would amend the annexation and development agreement, and if there are certain things that the town wants, you should put that in the agreement. You can refine it later on with site plan review, but if you wanted, I'm just making this up, you're not going that direction, Kyle. If you wanted 10% of the units to be affordable, quote unquote, with a certain definition, put that in the agreement so they know they have to go do that as part of their eventual development plan. It's my intention to make sure that something can always happen to developers. I've been involved with 2. One died in a avalanche skiing, and the other one with the marble quarry. He was driving from Denver here and was killed in a car accident. And then things change, and I want to make sure with the town attorney, don't want anything to happen to you, but I mean, if something, hey, developers go away, I mean, things change for a number of reasons,
So,
but I mean, to me, this event center is really good for the town. I mean, if something happens and a new developer wants to come in, I mean, one thing I think you should retain is that event center, and that event center needs to be in the first couple of phases.
Sure thing.
So that's what you get.
Now,
So you won't see that agreement until.
Right, so yeah, to add clarity to what you're saying, I think to the point maybe with Trustee Hanrahan, right, if we wanted to say you have to, right, the majority says we want some form of affordable housing, that's done at the site plan. Is that what you're saying?
Write the requirement in the development
Agreement.
and annexation agreement, and then they can fulfill it and refine it as part of the site plan.
Gotcha, yeah.
And it's good for everybody to know what those basic rules are, and I'll get to another one of my recommendations that I think they're, we talked about the recommendation. I think we're all basically on the same
Right.
playing field with the exception of one, and that's just working out details.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
let me, maybe it's time for me to get back into the staff presentation now. Okay. Talking about the PUD guide and PUD standards, there are a number of things taken from the town code, and that's lot coverage. And lot coverage in Silt is a little bit different. Most places, lot coverage involves all your impervious surface, including parking, driveways, walks, and all that. And that's not the case with Silt. Silt's basically your building footprints and your overhangs. And there's a couple other things, the site plan review process. I mean, we should probably make the PUD guide a standalone document, put a couple definitions in the process in there, because how about the site plan review process changes and gets ridiculously intent or super easy. Their intent is to go through a certain process. I think that ought to be in the PUD guide and not just depend in the future for whatever the code says, because that may change. I mean, I'd like a few things to be changed in there. So that's one thing that I think is important to note. A couple other things besides that well that we talked about, Divide Creek, they had a surface use approval for mineral development on there, and I know they've been working on removing that, and the town attorney and I think it's good to get any mineral development use on that property, any surface somewhere else. With directional drilling, they can probably do that, and you can update us later on that, Mitchell. And there are various items negotiated with the original agreement that will need to be reviewed. I think the town attorney is already doing that. Another thing that had an awful lot of, I'm going to share the screen here again, and am I up there? Okay. The original, let's see, it's probably, okay, here we go. The original paths for the area had a path right here on the east side of BLM, and we scrapped that as part of the sketch plan discussion, because you get a bit away from the BLM structure itself. It drops off 90 degrees to the river, and there really wasn't room to do it, on that private property. So we've changed and made, you saw the end result of a lot of the path resubmittal, which we fleshed out as part of the sketch plan. And the other thing that came up was that the applicants have committed to connect to the Lova Trail on the south, which that's where it's supposed to be. Because when we were talking about the sketch plan, well, how are you going to connect? Shouldn't you be connecting to a path over there near Holiday Inn? And we don't know where that's going to come in or how, but they've committed to do that, and that's something that could be done with a future site plan review. In terms of the zoning specifics, I've already told you about the maximum number of residential units. That event center, this is one where the development is less intense than in most of your commercial zone districts. For the event center district, that's 20,000 square feet per acre, which is, that's a 0.5 FAR, which is not very intense for the heart of the development. The maximum lot coverage is 70% in both the event center and the mixed-use districts, and the maximum building size in the mixed-use districts is 30,000 square feet. The height is 25 in that lodging district, which is on both sides of the event center. So that's part of lodging right here, and that's part of lodging right there. Another feature there zoning is the minimum landscaped area is 18% of area you disturb. So it doesn't mean that you have a total of 18%. If they're leaving a 2-acre parcel and 1 acre is going to not be developed, that'll stay open. So that's 18% is as percentage of total disturbed area. The applicants have met the open space requirements for PUD. We'll have to see as we get through the subdivision, that parkland dedication that they are proposing. My findings, they meet the PUD approval criteria. They are in my staff report. I'm not going to read them. If you want me to, I will, but I think it's been a long enough night. So they did meet all the review criteria. And my recommendation, this for the PUD, the PUD is well conceived and meets the town's PUD approval criteria and appears to protect the town as development would proceed. It provides a new amenity to the area and can bring great benefit to the town. Staff recommends to the board that they approve the Rislende application, PUD development and zoning plan with the following conditions. And they are that the PUD guide be reworked to be a standalone document, which will be included as part of the approval exhibits. That critical concepts such as site plan review and lot coverage be reworked as part of the PUD guide so that their importance is retained for the project in case the underlying Silt Municipal Code sections are amended or eliminated. That in order to protect the town, that under change of ownership by reason of default, death, or other such means, that the event center is considered critical and still would be required to be developed in conformance with the proposed development and phasing schedule as shown in the application. That a mutually agreeable, appropriate vested rights timeframe be included in the final development plan. 5, that the area indicated as PUD River Zone be dedicated to the town as part of the subdivision approval. I've had a little pushback on that. Now, with the original Divide Creek Center, that entire island area, which is right here, it was shaped a little bit different with the Divide Creek documents. That went to the town. So they get use of that and they'll manage that, and that's probably fine. I think the river area is very important. I think river areas for all these communities in the Colorado River Valley and the Roaring Fork Valley are critical, and this is where the town gets its drinking water. So I think the town ought to get the river area as dedicated to the town. The applicant did suggest that there's a lot of details to work out, and they want to work carefully with the town so that all the various use, management, and legal issues are in agreement with both parties. The Planning Commission accepted their addition to that, where, work together to make sure if we're going to ask for the river to be dedicated to the town, that they're part of those discussions, and we work out together. The 6th thing is other conditions as noted necessary by the board. We haven't gotten there yet. And my last one, and I did not bring this up with the Planning Commission because it hadn't come into my mind yet, but that the PUD guide include the site plan review process, that the board have the final decision-making power, or at a minimum has the ability to call up a specific site plan for review and comment. As I told you before, right now, the way the code's written, you don't see that unless there's an appeal. The Planning Commission, they discussed the application, had hearings at 3 different dates, April 19th, May the 3rd, and May 17th, and they unanimously recommend that the board approve the application with the conditions noted above, with the exception of that last one, number 7, which I did not bring to them. That's the PUD's zoning recommendations and staff report at this time. And if you have questions, we can discuss, and then if you'd like to, I can finish up with the sketch plan staff report, or we can do that at the next meeting, because this meeting will have to be continued to a different date.
I have one question, I guess.
Oh,
Who's talking?
that's Attorney Sawyer.
Attorney Sawyer.
This is Attorney Sawyer.
Oh, okay.
I think Mark and I had a wire that got a little crossed.
Oh,
There's
okay.
one additional condition that needs to be added to any resolution related to the PUD itself, and that is that by second reading of the PUD and approval, that the parties have a reworked annexation and development agreement. Because we cannot approve modified PUD zoning without concurrently modifying the provisions of the annexation and development agreement to conform with those obligations. And really the PUD zoning should also be approved concurrently with the preliminary plan, or at least that's frequently how this is handled, so that the zoning provisions can be measured against the more detailed submittal requirements in the preliminary plan, although admittedly that isn't always a necessity, but often it is a smart way to proceed.
I guess I did have a question. Did they have to do any, it was probably for Cheney, or Planner Cheney, did they have to do any kind of a study with the state or the county on the road for like the traffic to get these permits for the driveways? I mean, how'd they determine that? Or was there any study of how much traffic is gonna go
Yes,
in
that
there?
was done with the last development and the last traffic counts, and I believe the traffic should be a little bit less than what it was in the previous traffic studies, and they did get access permits from CDOT. I mean, they would have to, they have a time limit, so they're no longer active, but they can request that they be reinstated.
Okay, that was just my,
Yeah.
yeah, 'cause I see there's some on the state and one on the county roads, so just curious.
And there's been a lot of engineering done with the past projects here, and, you know, water and wastewater are out there. I mean, that goes right down that frontage road to the high school. And if you look at the sketch plan, which I haven't got to at this point, you know, there's water out there. Part of the sewer, with the northernmost lots, they can gravity feed, and then some of the other tracks will have to flow to the existing substation by Holiday Inn. If that gets to a certain capacity, then that will have to be increased. And that should be part of the approval also.
Okay.
So so the engineering, and there's gonna be more engineering with the preliminary plan, which, I guess, Michael, I did not know you were gonna ask, talk about having a preliminary plan tied into the PUD, because, we were working on the assumption that the sketch plan was satisfactory for that and go to the preliminary plan as the next step. I'm asking the town attorney right here now.
Yeah, as I indicated, that is not a must. And maybe, Mark, that's a condition that we leave out for now, and you and I have a follow-up discussion.
Okay.
Again, there are things that one can discover in preliminary plan review that can influence PUD, which is often why the PUD and the preliminary plan are processed simultaneously, but you know, that there may be, in this situation, enough information now to be able to determine the adequacy of infrastructure improvements to handle the intended density without having preliminary plan engineering.
Okay, well, yeah, I think I have a way to handle that, and Mike, I always did, you know, an amended development and annexation agreement was always, that had to be part of the approvals here, so I wasn't trying to get away from there not being one.
Okay.
What was so I'm curious, when you had mentioned on number 5, the pushback regarding the river zone being dedicated to the town, was the pushback from the applicants?
Yes.
And was that what you had mentioned regarding you wanted to retain ownership of that property to create your own park, right?
That's for the island.
Right.
Yeah, yes. So, yeah, the island wasn't part of the pushback. It was my recommendation that the
That'd be
river
dedicated to the town?
be dedicated to the town, yes. Mhm.
Yeah. And when you say the planning commission accepted a suggestion by the applicant
Well,
related
that,
to the.
that we work, we just don't say, hey, the town gets it. Hey, let's see what that's gonna look like, work on the details, because
Sure.
they have an interest, especially if they're working on that island area.
Of course.
They don't want 55 rafts coming in at a certain time, but there are ways to work with all this stuff.
Okay. All right, I got that. I didn't write down anything regarding what Attorney Sawyer said, just so you guys know for the
Yeah.
whatever motion. So, can you can you clarify a little bit about exactly the point Attorney Sawyer was making on that annexation agreement in relationship to what we're looking at here with rezoning and approving the sketch plan here?
Well, I think his point was, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Michael, but, basically you look at it's advisable a lot of times to have the PUD zoning itself be a companion document to the preliminary plan, because that's where a lot of the engineering details is worked out.
Okay.
And the way we've been working on this project is that there's a sketch plan, and then the preliminary plan will come in separately after the zoning and the sketch plan are approved. And I guess Mike wants to make sure that if there's any conflicts in terms of capacity or anything else, that we have the ability to tweak the zoning later on. Mike, am I saying this correctly?
I think that's correct. The zoning works in concert with the preliminary plan engineering and with the development agreement. Your zoning sets forth, densities that the developer is entitled to develop as a matter of right. Those densities have to be handled by public infrastructure improvements. And you usually want to make sure that the proposed public infrastructure is going to function in such a way that that you're not over-promising in the zoning phase for what you then later learn about in the preliminary plan phase. Preliminary plan is the very engineering intensive phase of the subdivision process. And then those provisions then get incorporated into the development agreement. So it's kind of all three work together. Again, you certainly can zone property without having a preliminary plan. I guess the risk would fall on the developer that if at preliminary plan there was a determination that the types of infrastructure required to facilitate the zoning that was put in place were too expensive or onerous for the developer to implement, they would have to go back in and modify the zoning to come into conformance with what the preliminary plan would support.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Got it.
And I had a couple of comments. Yeah, I agree with Trustee Knott. I mean, if there's raw water available for irrigation as opposed to domestic water, yeah, use it. And a question for Planner Chain, and maybe I'm wrong here, but isn't town code building height 27 feet? So is this 40 feet going to be only for this PUD, or?
No, 40 feet is for,
Like you said, maybe I'm.
40 feet is for one, zone district in here, but actually there's one zone district that I have to get my code out that's allows 45-foot high buildings in the town. So there's actually a more in.
Okay, then, all right, there's more, okay.
There's a more liberal zone district.
Okay,
that
gotcha,
allows taller
understood.
buildings.
And yeah, the only other comment, in regards to the access points, I read everything, and the town engineer recommended fewer access points because he was saying traffic was going 65 to 75. but 65, 75, I mean, these people are breaking the law.
Oh,
They're
on
breaking
that
the speed limit.
That's
So
35.
why
35.
is he yeah, it's 45. So why is the town engineer recommending them reducing access points because of people that break the law?
Well, that was just one of the, that's just one of the reasons that he recommended considering bringing the main flow, okay, down here.
Yeah.
You can see,
Yes, I mean, I get
Okay,
that,
all right,
but
yeah.
why are we
but,
asking people to do things to appease lawbreakers?
well, he's not really, well,
Yeah, I mean,
we worked that out. I mean, I sort of agree with the applicants that you don't want your main traffic to be right here at that island area. That's too close to the river. I also believe that if you have more traffic out there on the frontage road, they're going to be driving slower, just more
Yeah.
traffic. They will be driving slower. And you also keep the speed limit at a certain
yeah.
max, and, you put, if you want it 35, you put it 35. So I think we've worked out that,
Oh, okay.
that was one of the critical discussion points that we had during the sketch plan, and Derek was involved. We had a meeting, Trey was involved with it also, and I think we worked that out.
Okay.
The other thing that came out of that discussion is that any access into track 4 would line up directly opposite the Holiday Inn access point there, not be offset.
Okay.
Oh, like just, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, so most of those
That
sketch
makes
plan
sense.
items, I'm getting ahead of
Gotcha.
myself again,
And
most
then,
of those
yeah.
were worked out, I believe.
The only other thing I had is I'm really in favor of trying to connect to that Holiday Inn path, just because, the town required the Holiday Inn to put that path in. The town required the BLM to put the path in, and as well as the KOA, they required them to put the path in. So that's why I'm kind of in favor of making this connection, connect to that path, just so someday we have all those properties, connected.
Yeah, well, the intent is hook into the path up there by the Holiday Inn proper, and also have some kind of connection down here at the south part of Divide Creek, where it borders the property. When the Lova Trail gets more evident, and when they know what they'd be hooking
Yeah.
into. So I think they've committed to do that, and that'll work out.
Okay.
Like, are you okay if they connect to it on that top corner here? Or are you wanting it to connect further
Well,
down?
the Holiday Inn had a path and it dead ends right at the bridge.
Yeah.
So the thought was someday continue it underneath the bridge so you don't have an at-grade crossing. All the bicyclists go underneath.
Oh, yeah, but they've got
And
that one coming
yes,
across.
they do have that one, you're right.
We do have
There's
that one
also a
out there
path
that
at the
goes all
north
way
end,
across.
too.
Yeah, and then I guess for every, okay.
Right
Yeah,
here.
so it would be mute, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because if we do have that, because that's what that path was for them to come in and come underneath the underpass, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just was thinking, because, the Holiday Inn and like KOA and all them, they spent money to actually build this path, and I just don't necessarily want a path going to nowhere.
Right.
So where would you
I'd like
where would you want the path to go?
Well, I mean, my thought was, kind of follow their original thing and then just kind of, follow there and go under.
Oh, I see.
But,
So
Well, we got-
basically
like I
just
said, we
follow
got
the
the
north
one
side.
there.
I think that's what we've
Track
talked about,
6.
Mitchell.
yeah.
Yeah, so are you talking about so the path would follow between, say, track 4 and track 8? Or do
Oh,
you
is that
want it-
track 8, the bottom
Exactly,
green one?
yes.
Yeah, or do you want it clear down on
Yeah.
the edge of track 8?
No, I was thinking follow their original path down here and just go along here
Along there, yeah.
and connect that way.
Connect over.
But then to get back to the KOA, you gotta come back, or if we just went straight.
Yeah, and then, when that middle parcel develops,
Right.
and
Yeah, when that-
ask
They
them
would, they
to
would continue on
that
through
path.
there to the KOA, yeah.
Yeah.
If commercial development is and retail and restaurants are primarily along the northern edge, would it make more sense to have the bike up there?
I think that's the intent. If you
Right.
have commercial places, you want your pedestrians to go by them, not behind them.
Right.
Right.
So that's what
Yes.
this is here.
So in that case, keep the bike path as well as pedestrian pathways along the northern edge there. And intersect with the Holiday Inn at the road, at County Road 311.
Need to talk?
Yeah. No, you have a point, because if that, well, I mean, we're getting.
Because
off
otherwise they're
track.
going way down, and then they've got to somehow cut up to get to the commercial retail establishments.
And trustees, if I may,
Yeah, let them speak for a minute.
when we first started going through this, and we looked at the original errata, there was a bullet point in there that said we need to connect underneath that 311 bridge, right, to the Holiday Inn path, right? And that, on the surface, that made sense, and then we started thinking about it, we visited, I've walked under that bridge. I don't know that a path under that bridge is tenable, especially during high water. I know that particular area flooded a month ago when we were at high water, and we weren't even particularly high this year. And on the other side, to connect to that Holiday Inn path, it doesn't necessarily go anywhere. It goes along the Holiday Inn property and then sort of stalls at that point.
Yes,
So
and
again,
then the next parcel would pick up the trail and
so again,
continue.
we're not necessarily connecting for all of that work and all of that effort. We're not really connecting into anything necessarily. And then there's the issues just about the feasibility of connecting under that 311 road. And we thought that by, pushing all of that traffic up to that main artery just south of the frontage road, we're giving people, probably better access to the property anyway, because that's gonna be more of a more highly traveled corridor than it is passing and ducking underneath the 311, right, to try to get to the other side of the road. There's just, it's not this San Antonio river walk that I think we had hoped it would have been 15 years ago when we sort of set up those plans. It's not really workable in my opinion.
No, I mean, yes, I mean, I was just thinking, because it's such a dangerous intersection, to get the pedestrians and the bicyclists away from that.
Was my thought. And to go back to Trustee Seifert question a little bit earlier, we have updated the traffic study, right? So there was one that was done in 13, right, with the old plan. We just completed this week the new traffic study.
Okay.
Based upon the new plan. And so Trustee Klassen, things like crossing and safety, right, that's all been worked into his recommendations. And we're gonna have that in front of you guys when we do the preliminary plan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I've got an opposite take on the whole under County Road 311. There's a potential, if this project is 3, 5, 7 years till completion, that 15 acres could be developed before then and have a connecting path.
Yeah.
That's true
Well,
too.
that's true, yes.
I know, to say that path goes to nowhere, I mean, technically right now, this is a lot of land that hopefully it's not, but it could be a path to nowhere.
Yeah.
And we've expressed the interest, the cooperation, the desire, frankly, to connect underneath 311 at some point. Because I think once that does become a really nice sort of corridor, a more heavily trafficked, path, commercially, profitably, I want those people on my property. But right now, it's just not feasible, it's dangerous, there's nothing really to connect to. And in the interim, let's connect them at that intersection up there and get that 15 acres on utilized better.
But if it's not in this plan, in 5 years, we can't come back to you and say, hey, you need to build this.
No, that would be something
that would be something you'd have to do voluntarily. So as a town, if we want that done, it needs to be part of this whole
You're right.
PUD.
Yes.
So we need to say, there needs to be language that says, if the 15 acres develop and there's a path, then this PUD is required. The high water thing, just like Glenwood Canyon. Water rises, they shut down the bike
Yep.
path.
And we're totally open to that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so I think that's some language in there.
But I do think the regional trail, kind of up on the north side, if we need to grant an easement for that, that becomes the connector. If there is high water, there's still a way to get
And I don't even
to
know.
a crosswalk at the county road and have a safety crossing there. So, I mean, I think that really becomes our regional, it's not a vehicular regional connection, it's a pedestrian and bike regional connection that's really important to this project. The other path that kind of loops around the U-shaped roads, those are really collector paths to get people either down to the river or up to the regional path. So I think the combination of everything we've talked about starts to work, but I didn't want to preclude a safe crossing at the county road.
Yeah, and
at that location either.
I'm not sure if that's a safe crossing. In my mind, to cross that road twice
Right.
to get to the Holiday Inn is probably not a safe crossing, in my opinion. Especially when we're adding more density to this property, more cars on that road. I would definitely like language in there that underneath 311
Right.
has a definite date of this happens
Yeah.
at the 15 acres, this is required to be built.
Of course, right now, they're crossing the river frontage road anyhow.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but the density is gonna go up with this project, so we have more cars than what we have now. I'm with Kyle, free market units, I think it's a government issue to build low-income housing, not a investor's. It's your money, do what you want with it. Parkland dedication, though, I think that 100% has to come to the town. It's way too easy for a boat to pull up there and someone to go, oh, it's 9 o'clock, we have a wedding going on, you can't park here, you can't have your boat here. If that's dedicated to the town, it's open. I think
Well,
that's.
Mr. Mayor, with respect, we've explored the options related to how public would engage at the river's edge along those tracks 6 and 7. And for us to be able to do what we want to do, right? So whether it's that wedding, whether it's that corporate, strategy meeting, we can't have people pulling shore.
Yeah, so
the river.
6 and 7, I'm fine with those being
Yeah.
private property. I'm talking down on track 8.
My concern there, and there could very well be a way to work through this, is simply liability. I can't have, the easy, the sort of the easy example is a drunken boater trying to come ashore and falling off into the river and something bad happened, right? That cannot be on me or on my property were something like that to happen. And so if there's ways for us to work through, those sorts of examples, I'm open for the conversation, but I want nothing to do with that liability.
And I would think if you try to keep that as private property, but you maintain it,
Yeah.
then you are liable for that guy that pulls up. If it's dedicated to the town is now liable for
Well,
that situation.
The dry ground would remain ours, right?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, that.
He's talking about track 8.
Yeah, I'm talking about track 8, where you guys are calling it, active parkland and
Yeah.
passive parkland.
So it's not the river, you're
Yeah.
saying that the island needs to belong to the town.
And I'm not the whole island, but I think that there's no parkland in this whole project dedicated to the town.
No, it's private parkland in lieu of the public dedication.
Yeah, and I don't know how anyone else feels, but I am not in favor of that. If a
wouldn't-
subdivision's gonna build, then the town gets parkland out of it. That's how every subdivision, we're dealing with Camarillo right now with.
If there's language that says it's public, but it's privately owned, I don't see what the difference would be. They maintain it and.
I think that's where you're a visitor and it doesn't say public park, then you don't know you can go on that piece of property.
I think your code is very clear, as the mayor indicated. You either have to dedicate land or pay the fee.
There is a third option in the code, just to remind everyone, and that's the option we're pursuing.
I have emailed the development group with concerns about trying to characterize private areas as public parkland to meet the dedication requirement. I think ultimately that will not serve you well.
Yeah, And then I've got to go back to our attorneys. I wouldn't, I don't know if I'd call it a suggestion that we have a preliminary plan to go along with the approval of this PUD. A sketch plan that setting zoning in stone is, I think, a mistake. It's way too vague on a project like this to not have hard, fast preliminary plans.
Yeah.
I agree. There are planning issues, legal issues, park issues, public versus private issues. There's a whole bunch of factors here across a number of vectors that warrant having that level of detail. I agree with you completely, Mr. Mayor. We need those details worked out prior to approval.
I agree.
All right, so that's an issue. The parkland's an issue. You're wholly against dedicating that parkland to the town of Silt, is what I'm kind of hearing from you.
Yes.
And the main reason is it'll interfere with the way that you plan to
Correct.
operate the event center.
Correct.
And the event center is on track
The
5,
events, the event center, as well as that beacon concept that we've been talking about.
right? The event center is 6, right?
The event center is 6, the beacon is at the bottom of track 3.
Track 3. So while it's on the plans
Oh, I see.
called,
Okay, well,
while it's called active and passive parkland, it's
Correct.
more exterior dining
No,
for
it's
the people using the beacon. It's not.
You don't need to use the beacon in order to access that land. There's public bike paths and trails that would lead you straight to it. Of course, if you stop and grab a bite to eat along the way, we're happier, but it's public access, it's signed as such. It's open, it's manicured, it's frisbees, it's music, it's, a blanket, however the public wants to use that land. Right?
Except for docking their boat and potentially falling in the river.
Correct.
You gonna have a spot to dock boats on this section?
No, sir.
So yeah, right now there's no dock in there anyways.
I mean,
There's a dock
On the
straight
opposite
across
side.
the
You're
opposite,
right.
the
so
opposite way.
so I just hear this as it's a public space with limited use from the public.
It's public space with limited river access. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
So semi-public.
So
what'd you say?
Semi-public.
Semi-public, semi-use.
So I boated for 15 years, and that section, you're not gonna pull into that side of the river.
It's
and
super
try to
steep.
shoot across to the takeout. That doesn't happen. That'll never happen. If you had a function where you had boaters coming specifically there, then coming downriver to Silt or to Rifle, that's a different option, but I don't see the boating to be an issue.
Yeah, with the river current, if you're not making your way towards the Silt boat ramp,
Way
you're gonna
before
pass
then.
it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to that island with the river current, you're not gonna make it over to the boat ramp, like Sam said.
And that
So-
particular stretch of river, because it's the inside curve, it's very deep and it's very steep. Just, I would invite y'all to just take another look at it, next time you're driving by.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been out to that piece
Yeah.
of land, actually.
I looked across at it, yeah.
It doesn't feel to me, like I've boated before, I'm not a boater, but I've been on boats. It doesn't feel to me like it's an easy access point naturally for boats, because that curve is gonna wanna shoot you out to the far side over there by the dog park. So you're gonna have to really work hard in order to get to that
Yeah.
inside curve.
I mean, I suppose as it relates to the parkland dedication, I mean, is this the only piece of property that bodes well for the park, right?
It's what we thought, it's frankly, it's where we thought there was good value for the public.
Yeah,
right?
by the
Because I
river
could,
and-
I could
yeah.
give you parkland at the top of track 2, but, what's the public value there?
No, I got you.
Right, so let's get people down to the water.
What I'm not sure about, just based on that whole part, is the idea of boating there. I'm not familiar with that part of the river.
Yeah, and
guess.
I'm not even worried about boating. I mean, if we're worried about someone coming from a boat and falling off into the river,
Right.
but someone could go to an establishment, come down the bike path, and
Right.
fall into the river.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
I mean, what's the difference? And I think at that point, if it's held privately,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not a safety rail to keep someone from falling in the river, it is their responsibility. A kid gets hit in the head with a frisbee, it's on private property, it's their responsibility.
So are you concerned about accessibility for the public?
I think it is. I think it's way too easy if it's not, even if it's signed as public, if you go on, you know, a GIS map and look at it, every piece of park property in the town of Silt is owned by the town of Silt, and it says town of Silt.
Yeah.
If you go look at this, it's gonna say it's owned by them.
I don't know a lot of kids that go to those.
Well, I
sites
think-
to look-
Well, no,
to see
but
where
I-
they can legally
What I
get
think,
it.
what I think maybe, tell me if this is accurate, maybe we can try to connect the dots, but like, I think the mayor's concern of it still being private property, but labeled as a public park, even if there's a writing and agreement that says otherwise, they could still shut that park down for a private event, say. So if they have a wedding of 150, 200 people, and that wedding party says, hey, we want this park all to ourselves from 4 to 8 or whatever, and we'll pay to do it, they may just do it. I think that's the concern.
I think with that, yeah, it has to 100% be dedicated to the town, in my opinion.
I agree. I think there's too much gray area. Otherwise, there's usage gray area. There's legal access.
I mean, yeah, so
gray area,
it's a
there's liability.
Yeah, it's a public park, someone gets hurt, and now it's a public park, the town's now getting sued. They're not getting sued because they've said it's the town's. But it's their property, they own it.
Okay.
So they leave a hole, a kid, and someone gets hurt, we get sued.
Or the other idea too is if you've got a couple acres of, you know, town-owned parkland, you know, we could still make decisions on what to do with that, right? Versus if it's just private property, we have no say in it whatsoever.
So this situation has happened in other communities, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And the other option is the developer keeps this and pays a parkland dedication fee to the town, so that the town has money to buy parkland somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But then the community misses out on this park.
On
the
this,
river.
yeah.
That's right.
So that'd be, disfavor to the citizens.
Yeah, that's my primary concern. If I'm there with my kids regularly, frequently.
I like the fact that it's, it would be something different than our Silt Town parks. You know,
Right.
We pretty much just, stamp them all out.
Right.
Come play on the monkey bars, throw basketball, whatever. Where these guys and their dream or their vision is gonna be like this entire vision is actually set aside from the town, what we have been doing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I like that. I like that new vision. Okay, let's see what happens.
Have you thought about that scenario that I brought up in regards to, you know, a big party at some point, maybe asking you to reserve
Sure.
that, you know, and you thinking in your mind, all right, well, you know, it's private, so maybe I can do that, and then we do cut off public access to it for X amount of time.
Yeah.
I think maybe Mayor Reichel was going more toward the legal side, and I thought maybe he was going more towards just the overall access of that property at all times to everybody.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, there's parallels to any city park, right? You can special access permit, I can cut off, you know, city park down here and have a family reunion or whatnot, right? And it's sort of private and.
Rent a pavilion in the park.
Yeah. So there's some parallels there anyway. And then the second piece is the more foot traffic, the sheer increase of guests that I can get onto this property to enjoy themselves benefits me. It benefits them, it benefits me, right?
Mhm.
And so there are opportunities for us to carve off sections. And that island is huge. right?
Sure.
Carve off sections, this is dedicated, this is for today. The rest is open, right? Or the rest is still available. And there's ways to manage that, to sign it, when I was talking liability, Mr. Mayor, it was strictly about that line between water and land. That's what I didn't want to deal with. And so the proposal is to sign that land that says it's, no coming ashore. Because I don't want to have to deal with that. But just like any other, private establishment, someone gets hit in the head with a Frisbee, right? It would happen, whether it's, at the miner's claim or parking lot of the grocery store, right? And so there's always those scenarios that.
Just this part right here.
That's what my insurance policy
trying to
covers.
get it in my mind that
It was that intersection
seemed to be-
between
Yeah.
the water and the land that I am really trying to avoid.
But the legal side, if it's a public park on private property,
Right,
now who gets sued when that person gets hurt?
I do.
Everybody.
I mean.
The town will always be
the first
sued, but
person, the
you
first
have the
person
deep
they're coming after
pockets
is the
above.
town.
You will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will.
Yeah, and we're gonna
You're
have
sued
to,
regardless. You approve the project.
I mean,
I think also,
So-
if
Let's ask the attorney.
it's a town park, and they walk out of their property onto there and they sue both of us, I mean, it's liability either way.
So the town has governmental immunity, and the town also has public insurance that deals extensively with parks. If it's publicly owned, it's not an issue. If it's privately owned and it's parkland, and this is something that I think the town and the development team need to have a discussion about, there is an open question in my mind about whether you can restrict people from exercising their First Amendment rights within what has been dedicated as a public park. And whether the applicant wants to have people potentially picketing and protesting in these dedicated public park areas, even if they're on private property. And so what we need to figure out is where the balance is. And part of that balance maybe, as the mayor noted, that the applicant will just have to pay the dedication fee, and the town will go use it to enhance its park area over on the dog park island, or somewhere else close by. I mean, but the issues that have been brought up today, they're important. They need to be fleshed out, and we're not going to reach resolution on them tonight.
Mm-hmm. That's probably true.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
There's a lot of moving pieces here.
Yeah.
Well, we would like to say it's good discussion. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
we need to hear it, and that's why we're here, so, I mean.
for sure.
We've appreciated it.
So I do have a question for our attorney, that if this is going to be continued, do we still need to do the open public hearing for comment?
I mean, I guess it probably doesn't hurt. I don't see anybody specifically, at least on the Zoom side, that's not part of the applicant team or the town.
Okay.
So you can open it, close it, and then continue this to whatever Mark has recommended for the discussion about the site, about the sketch plan. At which time we will have some discussions with the developers team about how we address issues that have been brought up tonight, and come back with proposals at the next meeting.
All right.
I for the next meeting, I'd like to know, we have like 9 developments going on in town, or 10. What are the numbers for affordable housing with those developments?
I don't think it's, I think it's zero.
Zero, because we don't have a requirement to build
Okay,
Yeah.
affordable housing.
yeah. Just curious.
You call affordable where it's deed restricted.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean, the closest you're gonna get is the funding that you're looking for on that, Jaffa funding on that one lot by the BLM. The rest, people maybe talk about workforce housing, but there's nothing to stop that from going up in value
Right.
10 years down the road or whatever.
Yeah.
All right.
I had one other question that I thought of while Attorney Sawyer was talking. What happens if you sell all of this to a third party and now that private parkland can be redesignated as whatever they want?
I would imagine that the agreement written between the developers and our attorney would address, you know, a transfer of property. and that
It
it
will
would
include
remain.
that? That was gonna be my question.
And,
Will-
and yeah,
Yes.
that's an excellent observation, trustee. I actually have written down on my notepad, you know, that the agreement could require rededication in the event of a land use
Okay.
change for this property. Yeah.
I don't know why I thought of that while I was talking, but that's the brain.
On the park lane, just to throw it out, Sam's idea, I like it. We already maintain 17 parks. And if we can get parkland and somebody else is gonna maintain it,
Like
I
it.
would be good with that.
All right, Public Works says go for it, so.
I mean, if there's a way we can do it, you know, we already maintain 17 parks. So if we can get parkland without having to maintain it, if that's feasible, if it works.
So,
I-
so perhaps, you know, as we kind of flush out these concerns, maybe that could be a discussion between the development team and, you know, the town staff, and maybe come up with some more specific keynotes on that.
Sure.
You know, and how we could really address the concerns that the mayor has, you know, and some of the other trustees about the usability and, you know, it's basically, it's accessibility at all times, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so. All right then.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so persons desiring to make a comment on this agenda item, which is the Rislinda Planned Unit Development Rezone and Subdivision Sketch Plan. Please activate the raised hand function in the meeting program. Or Sheila, did we have any phone calls or emails in regards to this item?
No, I did not hear from anyone, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Do we have any hands raised?
There are no hands raised at this moment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And would anybody in the room like to speak to this agenda item? All right. Seeing none, the time is 10:33, and I will close the public hearing and open it up to further discussion by the board or a motion. I guess the motion would be to continue.
Continue the public hearings, and at the next meeting, staff will finish up the sketch plan portion of the presentation, and then we can see what progress we've made on some of these other issues. And you can also come with more questions, because when I have these discussions, I have no more questions, and 36 hours later, I have 7 of them, so you may come up with something too.
Yeah, you're right about that. Okay. Any other discussion?
Nope.
I do think it's I think it's worth noting that I want this project here.
Yeah.
I do.
For sure.
I like it.
Yeah, no,
I
it's a
think
great project. I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah. So we'll flush out these ideas here, so. Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to continue the public hearing of the Rislinda Planned Unit Development Rezoning and Subdivision Sketch Plan, AKA Divide Creek Center PUD, and staff will finish the sketch plan for further discussion.
Second.
Can we amend that motion to continue it to July 11th?
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's right.
Amend the motion to continue the public hearing to our next meeting on July 11th, 2022.
Yeah, I got my count.
Yeah.
Second.
All right. We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Not to continue the public hearing for the Rislinda Planned Unit Development Rezoning and Subdivision Sketch Plan, aka Divide Creek Center PUD, to the next meeting, which is on July 11th. All's in favor?
Aye.
All's opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for the conversation, guys.
Thank you, guys. Yes.
Yes, thanks, guys.
Thanks for your patience.
Yeah.
It's tough to follow the waterworks.
Well, as you know, if you read that,
I know.
the first one of those we've done in a long time.
I know. Someone is.
Yeah.
Parallel universe is that?
Thanks, good discussion.
I wanna follow.
Oh, we're only an hour behind.
Yeah.
No problem.
we've done all we
I'm
can.
gonna do this.
We still have an executive session.
Things are looking.
DV treasurer talking to me like, everything's good?
Okay.
You can't afford a water plant?
No water plant in there?
Touch. Thanks. Have a good night. Take care. See you.
I think so. All right, I'm getting out of here.
All right, thank you, sir. Since we are after 10 o'clock, we need to make a motion to continue the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to continue the meeting.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Not to continue the meeting, seconded by Trustee Clausen. All's in favor?
Aye.
All's opposed? Okay.
Hey, nobody opposed.
Yep. The next item on the agenda is the first reading of ordinance number 11, series 2022, in order to the town of Silt, Colorado, amending chapters 12.12 of the town code to allow the town to require the installation of conduit as condition of an excavation permit. And we have a continuance requested by staff until July 11th.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to continue the first reading of ordinance number 11, series 2022 to the July 11th, 2022 meeting.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Not to continue the first reading of ordinance number 11, series 2022 to July 11th, seconded by Trustee Clausen. All is in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the May 2022 financial report, and I will turn this over to Treasurer Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So 41% of the year has elapsed. We're looking really well on the sales tax and the use tax. As far as revenues go, we're on track in most of our funds. We have like our conservation trust fund, our irrigation fund, our park impact fund, that are a little low or below the 41% as far as revenues go. I don't see that we're going to have an issue by the end of the year keeping up with that. Our expenses, we're a little below in most of them, which is not a bad thing. We just have not had most of our, I'll spit this out here in a minute. Oh, my brain went blank.
It's after 10.
It's after 10, yes. I'll pass that.
All right.
We're doing well on our expenses. My brain's not working. We're right on line with our trash, water, and wastewater and irrigation revenues that we had projected. And I'll answer any questions you may have.
Can we afford a new water plant?
Say that again?
Can we afford a new water plant?
Absolutely. We'll just make somebody else pay for it.
I like it.
Nice.
There you go.
Can you check under your chair for
Yes.
$62 million?
Yeah, no kidding.
It wouldn't fit, unfortunately.
No, I don't have any other specific questions.
I ask her that on a daily basis.
I
nicer to
bet
get
you
a
do.
response.
Spends the money, even when I tell him we don't have any. He just
I
spends.
keep spending.
These numbers look great.
Thanks, Treasurer Tucker.
Yes, thank you very much.
Looking good.
Yeah, they look great.
Next up is the administrator and staff reports. Turn this over to Administrator Lehman.
The only thing I would like to just report on verbally is on July 5th, we go before the Garfield County Board of County Commissioners on the OHV issue for second reading on their ordinance to allow OHVs north of Silt. So if any of you wanted to show up, it looks like that meeting starts at 8 o'clock. There are 3 things ahead of it. Actually, about 5 things ahead of it. I don't know exactly what time it would go off, but certainly the more the merrier when they see elected officials. They like elected officials a lot more than they like me, commissioners. So if you showed up, that'd be great. Otherwise, I know you're all busy and you have other things to do in life, but I do want to extend that
Thank you.
invitation, of course.
Are they voting on a
That's all I have.
specific route or just on all the county roads there?
No, there's certain roads.
Okay, yeah, maybe kind of how we showed them or whatever?
Yep.
Cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What we proposed is what they
Oh, good, okay.
bought in to, and then there was a little bit of negotiation, but that's what
Yeah.
they ended up with. Yep.
Good deal.
Okay.
That's
Jeff,
all I have.
I was just gonna ask quickly, Jeff, is there an advantage of any kind if the trustees can't attend the meeting, should we send an email or a message to the
For sure.
commissioners
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
So if we can't make it, maybe we can
Yep.
at least commit to sending them an email that says, hey, we're all in favor. If it comes from all of us, it
Yeah.
probably looks that much, but hey, it's unanimous.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
individually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John Martin would be the chair of
Cool.
the commission. It'd be one elected official to another, that'd be powerful too.
Good stuff.
And they still do everything on, virtual, so, if you wanted to, you could certainly
Zoom
appear
in.
that way, I believe. For sure.
Okay.
And I'll get that link to you so you can if you want to.
Thank you.
All right. Updates from the board and board comments. Trustee Hanrahan?
Just two things quickly. Number one, I've been to Silt Island Park twice since the work was finished. Trey, it looks tremendous. The parking area is huge now, incredibly smooth. The area, the roundabout right in front of the boat launch is huge now. You can actually, and I actually saw folks doing it with their trucks, getting around, and being able to back in and get out easily. And even when there was another one waiting, it wasn't like a cluster of trucks trying to jigger around one another and get around. Superb. It looks outstanding. The one thing, again, having gone there twice, each time I was out there and just asking people generally what they thought of the improvements, they love them. And then the next issue they brought up was that there are some, and I can't use the words that they used, let's call them undesirable members of society hanging out at Silt Island Park. And really this question is for Chief Kite. Is there any chance we could increase the patrols going on there? I know it shuts down at a certain time, but particularly at dusk. One of the folks that I was talking with was a father who was out there with his kids, and he was basically like, hey, who the hell are those dirtbags and why are they here? And I was like, well, they're here because they can be. But he was like, yeah, but I'm trying to hang out with my kids and fish. And he thinks they're druggies and dealers, and whether or not he's true notwithstanding, it may be beneficial now that we're improving it to increase usage and get more families there if there was more of a police presence. So that's really a question for Chief Kite. And he may not be on still, so.
Maybe, I don't know.
He might have.
I'm sorry, I had to step away from Ben. I didn't get the question.
No worries. Talking about the improvements to Silt Island Park, I had a couple of conversations with other folks while I was there over the weekend, and they were asking if the police patrols and presence could be increased at the park because of some undesirable folks that were hanging out there.
Sure. We could make that a part of our regular patrol, go out and do some foot patrol and just kind of meet and greet with folks.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
All right.
That's it.
Okay. Trustee Flores?
The very informative presentation for water, wastewater. I wish we would have had it a year and a half ago. So we should probably be patient and cross our fingers. Sounds like that's it.
Okay. Trustee Clausen?
Yeah, because it's late, I'll keep it short. But yeah, the Island Park parking lot looks really good. And man, if there's any way we could get that thing chipped and sealed, it would be awesome. And I know it's real expensive, but you know, because it's perfect right now, as opposed to 2 or 3 years, then you got to redo it again. Man, if there's any way possible, that would be great.
Trustee Seifert?
Had a lot of items to discuss tonight. Really was glad everybody on the board had different ideas and opinions on everything. They asked questions on both of the big subjects, so shows we're really keeping the town what happens. So other than that, that's all I had.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
Just wanted to say, Trustee Flores, I appreciate your input on the whole water discussion, man. A lot of that stuff's just nothing I know about. So I just appreciate you throwing your knowledge out there and asking some really great questions on that. helps me understand a little bit more about what's going on. I just wanted to make a quick note too. There's a handful of just dead trees around town. I know they're on private property, but there's one that fell over. Big trees, probably a 25-foot aspen tree, and it was been dead for a while, and it fell over almost onto the sidewalk. And then coming up 16th Street, right as you're going up the hill, I think that tree is on town property, but it is hanging onto the sidewalk.
Yes.
I was walking up that road, and you gotta kind of, so would be maybe nice if we can go out there and just
That one's on the list. We got.
cut half that thing down, dude, because that thing's always doing it. But so, other than that, that's all I got.
Okay. Just want to thank everyone that came out for the Tyler Russ Band. It was a good show. Had a good time out there. I love how Silt, the kids all just migrate together and just play. It's a cool small town feeling thing when, you know, the adults can hang out, listen to the music, and the kids just go play in the back 40 and have fun. So
That's great.
Let's get some more people out there. The next one's the Van Halen tribute band, which should be great. We got some movies in the park coming up before that, and then Silt Farmers Market starts next Wednesday. So let's see some people out there.
And we're gonna have music at all of those too. So.
All right, awesome.
And I guess it should have been in staff report, but just FYI, we had major tagging on the green room, and one of our security cameras got stolen.
Oh.
That was hanging on the green room. So while the kids use the skate park and everything, they need to kind of police themselves, and because we also had to take a couch off the stage that they drug up and set on the stage.
What?
Yeah.
Oh.
So
And no footage of them taking the camera?
no, because unfortunately that camera's on the back side of the green room. And when we noticed it was gone, I went back through all the footage I can.
Oh, and it wasn't.
And it's
yeah.
not showing me any footage, so I don't know if it deleted itself from the system.
There was two
Because
more,
it's
yeah.
over 30 days or 60 days or
Gotcha.
what. But yeah, the whole back of the green room was painted basically.
Darn it. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. We have an executive session.
I'm gonna have a cookie.
So I will make a motion to enter the executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing a strategy for negotiations, and instructing the negotiators regarding renewal of the town's cable franchise agreement with Comcast pursuant to CRS section 24-6-4024E.
Second that motion.
All right. We had a motion, motion by Mayor Reichel to enter into executive session, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Knott. All's in favor?
Aye.
All's opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We will give the camera here a couple seconds to get set up, and we will do this. In the executive session. Oh. Hello? Okay. No formal action was taken in the executive session. The participants in the executive session were no one entered the executive session, no one left the executive session. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into executive session occurred during the executive session, or that any improper action occurred during the executive session, in violations of the open meetings law, I'd ask that you state your concerns for the record. Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, got a motion by trustee Clausen to adjourn the meeting, seconded by trustee Seifert. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Somebody said, "Hey,
All right, thank you.